Lin Feng, brother, I challenged you to exchange pointers but you haven't replied to me yet. At least, you should fight me first and then challenge brother Meng Chong, said Feng Xiao mockingly. When Meng Chong heard these words, he nodded and said, he's right, Lin Feng. Are you trying to escape the fight by changing the subject? You should first defeat brother Feng Xiao and then challenge me. Lin Feng, brother, I challenged you to exchange pointers but you haven't replied to me yet. At least, you should fight me first and then challenge brother Meng Chong, said Feng Xiao mockingly. When Meng Chong heard these words, he nodded and said, he's right, Lin Feng. Are you trying to escape the fight by changing the subject? You should first defeat brother Feng Xiao and then challenge me. A moment ago, Meng Chong was at loss for words and had nothing to say, but now he had an opportunity. What you mean to say is you'll only fight me if I defeat him? Said Lin Feng in a mocking tone while looking at Meng Chong. Meng Chong avoided Lin Feng's eyes and looked hesitant. Immediately after, he nodded and said, indeed. Feng Xiao wasn't weak. He was at the peak of the 6th Ling Qi layer. He hadn't seen He Mo and Lin Feng's fight and knew very little about it, but he had heard the news that it was a draw. Besides, Lin Feng was still at the 5th Ling Qi layer at the auction market. Meng Chong didn't believe that Lin Feng was able to defeat a cultivator at the peak of the 6th Ling Qi layer after such a short time such as Feng Xiao. The second prince was overestimating Lin Feng's strength. Feng Xiao would humiliate him. The crowd was looking at Lin Feng. The second prince was particularly kind to Lin Feng, which caused some of them to be in a bad mood. They would gladly watch if Lin Feng could be humiliated. Lin Feng sipped his glass of alcohol with a cold aura around him. Immediately after, he slightly raised his head, glanced at the crowd and finally looked at Feng Xiao. Lin Feng had no choice but to humor him since Feng Xiao really wanted to use Lin Feng to show his strength. Where do we fight? Asked Lin Feng indifferently, which surprised the crowd. Excitement immediately flashed through their eyes. Lin Feng had accepted the challenge. Feng Xiao was also a bit surprised. He smiled immediately after, and said, watching a battle from the pavilion while drinking some alcohol is a very pleasant thing to do. The landscape is wonderful. We could take advantages of the bamboo rafts on the lake, what do you think? All right, replied Lin Feng indifferently. The crowd was sneering at him. Who didn't know that Feng Xiao had a hurricane spirit and that he was extremely powerful? Choosing the lake as a battlefield would give him a huge advantage. Lin Feng had surprisingly accepted. All right, I'll go first. Feng Xiao's silhouette flickered and in the blink of eye, he appeared on a bamboo raft outside of the pavilion. Then, the crowd saw the bamboo raft move with precise skill towards the center of the lake. What a nice agility technique, the crowd was amazed. They then looked at Lin Feng to see if they could catch his surprise, but Lin Feng's face didn't reveal shock. He looked expressionless and calmly stood up. He slowly walked towards the edge of the pavilion and jumped onto a bamboo raft. Immediately after, the bamboo raft started moving slowly towards the center of the lake. His movements were extremely ordinary and didn't look beautiful and elegant, which made the crowd look at Lin Feng with disdain. It seemed like Lin Feng was definitely going to lose that battle. Many people were even regretting that Feng Xiao had challenged Lin Feng before them. If they had challenged him first, they could have gained the prestige and been in Feng Xiao's position. After Feng Xiao arrived in the middle of the lake, he turned around. While standing on the bamboo raft, he looked at Lin Feng and a smile appeared on his face. Lin Feng, brother, I heard that your strength was exceptional, but today, it seems like it was unjustified. How should I dispose of you? Said Feng Xiao jokingly. At that moment, he wasn't acting politely anymore, he was now showing his true colors. However you wish, said Lin Feng as indifferently. He was extremely calm. The crowd found Lin Feng's mind hard to fathom. He was indeed mysterious. Hee, it feels like we are like old friends even though this is the first time we have met, so I will not make you suffer too much. I will cripple your cultivation and let you live, said Feng Xiao while smiling evilly. His heart was filled with malicious intent. Having accepted his challenge on the lake was an extremely reckless decision. If he hadn't put on his facade of kindness, how could he possibly get such an opportunity? Didn't you just say that the purpose of that battle was to exchange pointers? Why is it that you are talking about crippling my cultivation? Asked Lin Feng indifferently, yet his heart was filled with extreme coldness. These noble cultivators were all the same, really arrogant and considered other people's lives as trash. Their hearts and morals were disgustingly rotten. It was the first time that Feng Shao was meeting Lin Feng. They didn't have any hatred between them, and yet he was already talking about crippling his cultivation as if it was something ordinary. When Feng Shao heard Lin Feng, he couldn't help but heartily burst into laughter. The other people in the pavilion were also laughing. Lin Feng was really a fascinating and amusing person. "What's so funny?" asked Lin Feng indifferently, which made Feng Shao stop. He looked at Lin Feng and said, "I said I wouldn't kill you, I am showing mercy." While talking, he moved his hand and a sharp wind rushed straight towards Lin Feng's bamboo raft. Boom! Lin Feng's bamboo raft was broken into pieces. Water burst into the air surrounding Lin Feng's body. But the crowd only saw that Lin Feng was surrounded by a wall of water and didn't know if he was alive. Only when the wall of water fell down once again, they saw that Lin Feng's bamboo raft was already broken and that Lin Feng was still standing there motionless. "If you don't try your hardest, how do you plan to fight against me?" asked Feng Shao while laughing and looking at Lin Feng. He had accepted to fight on the lake. Lin Feng was asking to die. "Do I even need to use any effort against someone like you?" said Lin Feng indifferently. A terrifying battle energy surrounded his body and like a fire spread around him and through the atmosphere. Lin Feng took few steps on forward. He was skillfully and elegantly walking on the water. When the crowd sensed Lin Feng's battle energy, they were stupefied. A moment before, Lin Feng was as calm the lake, and now he was releasing battle energy that was sharper than a sword. Besides, the battle energy was growing even more intense with each of his steps. It was causing their hearts to race. "Ha!" Feng Shao frowned and looked at Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked elegant and agile, and his battle energy was piercingly sharp. Whoosh! Feng Shao swiped his hand forwards and two sharp hurricanes rushed straight towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng moved his hand at incredible speed and a wave rose from the lake. That wave seemed like it had transformed into a sharp sword which stopped the hurricanes. Boom! Lin Feng continued moving forwards. Immediately, the wave crashed down and disintegrated Feng Shao's bamboo raft. The crowd was amazed by Lin Feng's movements. At that moment, Lin Feng was surrounded by huge waves roaring across the lake. It seemed like the lake had turned into an enraged dragon under Lin Feng's feet. His battle energy was still burning outwards and now covered the entire lake. Feng Zhao's facial expression drastically changed. He now had an extremely ugly expression. He looked gloomy, as if he had just realized how terrifying Lin Feng's power was. At that moment, Lin Feng looked determined, his mouth slightly opened, and he said coldly, "I first admitted defeat, not because I was scared but because I thought that fighting was pointless. Since you really wanted to fight against me, I accepted." While talking, Lin Feng moved forwards again. It seemed like he was unceasingly moving, and suddenly his silhouette looked like it had disappeared. "Pierce!" Lin Feng's voice spread through the air. The crowd couldn't see where Lin Feng was. Besides, at that moment, Feng Shao was dumbstruck. Lin Feng looked like a terrifying warlord. Lin Feng's body was faintly discernible and an incomparably huge amount of battle energy was moving towards him. Feng Shao could not tell where the battle energy was coming from, but he could feel the danger rushing towards him. Retreat! A hurricane emerged in the atmosphere and Feng Shao rushed backwards. A moment after, his body intensely shook and he loudly groaned. A strong sword qi had pierced into his body and completely destroyed his qi passageways before piercing his dantian. "I didn't want to fight, not out of fear but out of disdain for pointlessly fighting." The crowd looked at the two silhouettes. Lin Feng attacked again. He pointed his finger at Feng Shao and deadly energy crashed into his body. Lin Feng did not want to fight against Feng Shao, that's all. Defeating Feng Xiao was an extremely easy thing to do. Feng Xiao had provoked Lin Feng. After Lin Feng had accepted the challenge, he had acted even more wildly and wanted to cripple Lin Feng's cultivation. Lin Feng instead had crippled Feng Xiao's cultivation and returned the favor. Lin Feng had used a single finger to cripple Feng Xiao's cultivation, which was at the peak of the 6th Ling Qi layer. Lin Feng had used a single finger to cripple Feng Xiao's cultivation, which was at the peak of the 6th Ling Qi layer. That finger had been enough to destroy all of his qi passageways and cripple his cultivation. What a terrifying power! The crowd was calmly looking at Lin Feng, but their hearts were pounding. No wonder Duan Wuya had told them that Lin Feng could defeat Mo. That battle energy could cover the entire sky, it seemed unstoppable. Possessing a battle energy which could swallow everything was the true power of a cultivator. How could they know that when Lin Feng nearly killed Mo, he wasn't even as strong as he was now? The power of his battle and sword energy was the result of 2 months spent practicing in the cultivation tower. Lin Feng could also control that divine black sword with a higher proficiency. He could understand its unfathomable mysteries a little better. Lin Feng was also deeply affected by the fact that he was able to understand how to use the celestial book. The first page had enhanced his power of comprehension and the second page had granted him a divine black sword. That was inconceivable. Lin Feng did not have the slightest idea as to what his spirit was, but he had thought of a great deal of things. Why were there so many kinds of spirits? How could such a powerful spirit such as his celestial book exist? That was a miracle in itself. At that moment, blood was uninterruptedly flowing out of Feng Xiao's mouth. His eyes were wide open. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. He was dumbstruck and looked terrified. Did Lin Feng really just cripple his cultivation? When he realized that it really was the case, he started shaking. He was heavily flustered with a face filled with panic, and his body was covered with cold sweat. Without being able to practice cultivation, he was worthless. Having a worthless person in such a big clan would be a humiliation. His destiny had been completely changed. His fellow clan members were going to make his life a misery. All the things that Feng Xiao was going to experience terrified him to the bones. He was also endlessly regretting what he had done. Why had he been the first person to challenge Lin Feng? Not only had he not managed to win the princess' heart, but he had also become a useless piece of trash. He would never be able to act arrogantly again. Even a slave girl would look at him in a disdainful way. Big clans had an important influence, but there were also rules. His fate was truly terrible. A moment ago, you said that you wouldn't kill me because you were showing mercy. Now, I decided to show mercy for you, brother Feng Xiao, as I have only crippled your cultivation. I didn't kill you. I am very merciful indeed, said Lin Feng while repeating Feng Xiao's ideals. In Feng Xiao's ears, these words were extreme ridicule. Feng Xiao had just realized that a moment before, he had acted this way towards Lin Feng, saying such unpleasant words. At that moment, Lin Feng's silhouette flickered. He grabbed Feng Xiao's body with one hand and started moving across the water with great speed. He was extremely fast and agile. A short moment after, Lin Feng arrived close to the pavilion and jumped inside with a single swift movement. He then threw Feng Xiao's body onto the floor, naturally and unrestrained. What an amazing agility technique! The crowd was astonished. They had found out Lin Feng's true ability. A moment before, his movements were very ordinary, yet at this moment, they were extremely agile and skillful, which astonished the crowd. Actually, Lin Feng wasn't an expert at agility techniques. He didn't practice amazing agility techniques and didn't have an agility-based spirit. It's just that he had intensely practiced the basics to a high level. In one breath, he could travel at an incredible speed. Therefore, in a single breath's worth of time, he had been able to cross the lake and arrive in the pavilion. When the crowd saw Feng Xiao's body lying on the floor like a dead fish, they were speechless. A moment ago, Feng Xiao had said he wanted to cripple Lin Feng's cultivation. Lin Feng's reaction wasn't exaggerated at all. Lin Feng, you're going too far. Today, His Highness invited us to have fun and the princess is here, but you surprisingly dare to act that cruelly and show no mercy. You crippled Feng Zhao's cultivation. Don't you think that this will make the second prince feel embarrassed? Said a voice from behind, sounding cold and detached. Lin Feng was surprised. He turned around and looked at Meng Chong. He then said indifferently, "Can you even be more shameless?" Meng Chong was talking shit again, which made Lin Feng grow furious. "Am I wrong? Everybody saw that you crippled Feng Zhao's cultivation," replied Meng Chong, sounding strict. Lin Feng smiled coldly and looked at Meng Chong. "Since you think that was cruel, I will show you what real cruelty is. Everybody here was a witness when you said that you would fight against me after him." When Meng Chong saw Lin Feng's cold smile, his heart was racing and he had an ugly expression. He then said, "If you are that cruel, I will not accept your challenge. Do you think that you can act so shamelessly?" Lin Feng said mockingly. Immediately after, a cold expression appeared on his face, and he said, "Do you think that I will bend according to your mood? What kind of person do you think that I am?" While talking, Lin Feng moved towards Meng Chong. Meng Chong's facial expression drastically changed. His body flickered, and he suddenly started running out of the pavilion. He then jumped away in an attempt to flee. If Lin Feng had managed to defeat Feng Zhao with one finger, Meng Chong would never be able to defeat Lin Feng. Lin Feng immediately launched himself forwards and arrived on the roof of the pavilion. He had a cold smile on his face while looking at Meng Chong's body racing through the air. Lin Feng then released his sword qi and sword force into the atmosphere. "Come back here." Lin Feng raised his hand. He was releasing even more sword energy. In the air, a black sword illusion suddenly appeared. It rushed through the air and crashed into Meng Chong's body. Meng Chong could not move while traveling through the air. He had jumped in the air to escape. However, in that situation, he couldn't escape Lin Feng's attack and now had no way to protect himself. Even though Lin Feng's attack wasn't very strong, it was enough. When the sword energy crashed into Meng Chong's body, he immediately fell like a meteor from the sky. "Bastard, I, Meng Chong, will never let you off." Meng Chong shouted these words while falling down. He was extremely furious while Lin Feng was smiling coldly. Lin Feng said, "Since you will never let me off, I don't need to be polite then." When Meng Chong heard Lin Feng, he was stupefied. While he was still falling from the air, he turned around and saw that Lin Feng was rushing towards him. Meng Chong's face immediately turned deathly pale. Why did he continue talking nonsense to Lin Feng? P.S. Lin Feng arrived in front of Meng Chong, who was still falling down, and without hesitation, raised a single finger and thrust it towards Meng Chong, who was still falling. In the blink of an eye, an incredible amount of sword energy emerged from Lin Feng's finger and pierced through Meng Chong's body, instantly crippling his cultivation. Lin Feng had shown no mercy at all. "Ah!" Meng Chong gave a horrible shriek while agonizing. The crowd could sense an extremely terrifying energy. Lin Feng was really cruel. He was incredibly determined and was a cultivator who stuck to his word. If he said that he was going to cripple someone's cultivation, he did it without fear. These noble cultivators should know better than to provoke an insane person like Lin Feng. None of them were close to being merciful, but at that moment, they had met someone who made even their ruthlessness seem insignificant. They had to be vigilant. He was a terrifying individual. Lin Feng had taught them a lesson, a practical life lesson. That lesson had cost Meng Chong and Feng Zhao both of their cultivations. Lin Feng came back to the pavilion carrying Meng Chong's body. He then threw his body onto the floor next to that of Feng Zhao. Meng Chong looked dispirited and deathly pale, even more so than Feng Zhao. Even though his body had no strength at all, he was still fixedly staring at Lin Feng. "No need to look at me that way. If you were able to do the same to me, you would. Besides, today, I didn't want to fight at all, it was your idea. A tooth for a tooth." Lin Feng looked expressionless and detached. It seemed like nothing could affect him. Immediately after, he raised his head and glanced at the crowd. He then said indifferently, "Are there any other people who wish to have a battle against me to exchange pointers? I will politely accept all requests." His voice was loud and resonated in the pavilion, making everybody feel anxious. In front of his ruthlessness, all of them were powerless to resist. The crowd was staring at Lin Feng looking uncertain, everybody remained silent. The crowd was staring at Lin Feng looking uncertain, everybody remained silent. Feng Xiao was at the peak of the 6th Ling Qi layer, but Lin Feng could cripple his cultivation using one finger. The fact that Lin Feng was extremely powerful was obvious. Besides, he was using a terrifying battle energy, fighting against Lin Feng was extremely dangerous. At that moment, energy arrived on Lin Feng's body which surprised him. Immediately after, he looked at Yu Tianchen. "You want to fight?" Lin Feng, who could feel Yu Tianchen's energy, asked him with a cold tone. Yu Tianchen didn't reply. He was staring at Lin Feng as killing intent flashed in his eyes. Even though Lin Feng had broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer, it couldn't be that easy for him to defeat cultivators of the 7th Ling Qi layer. Yu Tianchen had broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer. However, if Yu Tianchen lost, Lin Feng wouldn't let him off easily. He might even cripple his cultivation just like he had done to Feng Xiao or Meng Chong. If Lin Feng crippled his cultivation, his future would be ruined, and even if he managed to have Lin Feng killed after, he would still suffer. In Yu Tianchen's eyes, Lin Feng's life was worthless and couldn't be compared to the worth of his cultivation. Even if he won that battle, he wouldn't exactly gain any prestige. He was the member of one of the 3 biggest clans. His social status was high. If he fought and won, it would just be another victory for him amongst all his other accomplishments, nothing more. Many people were not worth fighting for him. Lin Feng's social status and reputation were low. He couldn't take the risk of fighting against him. When he thought about this, the energy around his body disappeared and he stopped looking at Lin Feng. He lowered his head and continued drinking. The crowd was surprised. They had also sensed the energy emerging from Yu Tianchen's body, and then it had suddenly disappeared. He didn't want to take the risk and fight against Lin Feng, so they were even less willing to take that risk. For a while, the pavilion was drowned into absolute silence. Not a single voice was to be heard. He, the second prince, Duan Wuya, laughed softly, breaking the silence. He looked at Duan Xianyi, who was sitting next to him, and said in a low voice, "Xianyi, what do you think of Lin Feng?" At that moment, Duan Xianyi looked at Lin Feng. She felt that there's something different about Lin Feng. Even though he was wearing tattered clothes, he seemed domineering. In her heart, she secretly had a good sentiment for him. Lin Feng was a proud and domineering young man. However, such a proud and domineering young man had initially refused to battle against Feng Xiao. Maybe the fact that he was wearing tattered clothes was the same reason for which he had refused the challenge, because Lin Feng didn't care about such petty things. Suddenly, Duan Xianyi was stupefied by Duan Wuya's voice. She turned towards him and looked at him as if the situation was funny. She couldn't help but lower her head and said, "Brother, what's wrong?" "Huh, what's wrong, little sister? You're suddenly lost in thought. You're even blushing." Duan Wuya was laughing, making Duan Xianyi feel even more embarrassed. Even though she was a princess, she was a woman above all. Just like any other woman, talking about such things was embarrassing. The crowd was stupefied. Some of them had piercingly cold expressions on their face as they glanced at Lin Feng. Among them, many of them wanted to become Duan Xianyi's husband. Even though they didn't really have feelings for her, they still hoped to marry her. If they could get married, their future would be filled with a wider range of opportunities to increase their status. At that moment, Duan Wuya was talking to Duan Xianyi about Lin Feng in a favorable way. Inevitably, the others were looking at Lin Feng in a cold way. Lin Feng frowned and lowered his head, and there wasn't the least bit of joy in his heart, it was rather coldness. He then turned towards Duan Wuya and looked at him with indifference. Alright, everybody clearly knows why I invited you today. Since there is nothing to say anymore, you can all leave, said Duan Wuya while looking at the crowd. After ordering for guests to leave, he looked at Meng Chong and Feng Xiao who were lying down. He then said, please take away these two as well. Lin Feng, you stay here, I have some things I would like to discuss with you. Duan Wuya said while looking at Lin Feng, which stupefied everybody else. They coldly looked at him as they left. They had no choice but to leave. Duan Wuya had already ordered for them to leave. They had to be obedient. When Ao Shui looked at Lin Feng with a deep meaningful look, he then gently tapped his shoulder as he walked past and left the pavilion. A short time after, in the pavilion on the lake, the atmosphere had become especially quiet. Duan Wuya, Duan Xinyi and Lin Feng were the only people left. Your Highness, what do you need to discuss with me? Asked Lin Feng with indifference. He. Duan Wuya laughed softly. He looked at Lin Feng and said, it seems like you're not in a good mood. Your Highness, do you think that I have a reason to be in a good mood? Asked Lin Feng in a cold and detached way. Duan Wuya didn't take notice of his tone and was still warmly smiling. Brother, you two can chat, I will leave now, said Duan Xinyi while standing up. She wanted to leave but Duan Wuya prevented her from leaving and said, Xinyi, I am your brother and have nothing to hide from you. Stay here. Don't be so impatient to leave. Duan Xinyi's beautiful face revealed an expression of uncertainty but she then gently nodded her head. Immediately after, she slowly sat down again and calmly stayed for their conversation. Lin Feng, what makes you unhappy? Asked Duan Wuya while kindly and warmly smiling at Lin Feng. Lin Feng looked at Duan Wuya and slowly said, since your Highness wants to listen to me, I will speak. Lin Feng clearly understood that Duan Wuya was well aware that he wasn't happy. Your Highness, a moment ago, in front of everyone else, you asked one question to the princess. You asked her what she thought about me. Were you not voluntarily trying to draw everybody's attention towards me? Your Highness seemed to think that I did not already have enough attention and asked me to stay here with you and the princess. I fear that now, everybody thinks that your Highness' purpose is to help me to marry the princess. I also fear that now, even the people with no enmity towards me will hate me. With every single influential family after me, I am a dead man, said Lin Feng coldly. Duan Wuya thought that it would make Lin Feng happy. However, it was clear to Lin Feng that it didn't put him in a favorable situation. He didn't have a high social status and wasn't part of a huge clan like the others. They were all interested in the princess to the extent that some of them were determined to fight over her, for example, Yu Tianchen. Duan Wuya had created a false impression in front of everybody. He had led everybody to believe that Princess Duan Xinyi was interested in him and he was going to act as a matchmaker, which had made Lin Feng become the target of every person who targeted the princess. None of them would forget this and they would make him pay. Each and every single one of these noble young men would devour people without status and not even spit out their bones. They engrave Lin Feng into their memories. He would then be unable to take a single step inside the imperial city ever again. Duan Wuya was causing a great harm to Lin Feng. Lin Feng, you are, as expected, just as smart as I thought, said Duan Wuya while laughing softly. He was very satisfied by Lin Feng's answer. As he asked the princess what she thought about Lin Feng, Duan Wuya had paid close attention to Lin Feng. If an ordinary man had heard that the princess could be interested in him, he would have been delighted. However, Lin Feng hadn't been delighted at all. His facial expression had immediately changed and revealed coldness. Lin Feng's face had immediately expressed his disagreement. Lin Feng shrugged. He didn't understand what Duan Wuya meant. Lin Feng, how many enemies do you have in the imperial city? Asked Duan Wuya. Lin Feng thought for an instant and then, while shaking his head, said, I have many enemies. The Yu clan, the Bai clan, Duan Tianlang and his son, the Nye clan, etc. Lin Feng had offended many influential people because of his beliefs, too many. He didn't even know how many exactly. What about their strength, how powerful are they? Duan Wuyan continued asking. Powerful, extremely powerful, said Lin Feng honestly. Since you already have so many enemies, does it matter if you have a few more? Said Duan Wuya while laughing softly, which stupefied Lin Feng. Hee hee. Duan Wuya saw that Lin Feng was speechless. He slightly smiled and said, Lin Feng, today, I made you come here, because I had, of course, anticipated everything. If she likes you, I will not be offended at all. Both of you would even receive my support. If you became the husband of the imperial princess, who would dare to attack you? In other words, my purpose wasn't to make even more people become your enemies, rather, my motivation was wholehearted and pure. Duan Xinyi and Lin Feng were both surprised. Even Lin Feng and Duan Xinyi looked at each other for a second. She immediately looked in another direction again. Her face was filled with shyness and excitement. If I could really marry such a woman, I would really be lucky, thought Lin Feng. He really didn't understand why Duan Wuya was treating him so kindly, to the extent that he had personally introduced the princess to him. Of course, Lin Feng clearly understood that even if the princess and he were willing to marry each other, it would be impossible for a person who doesn't have a high social status. For him it was impossible. Above the calm lake, a gentle breeze was blowing, making Duan Xinye's hair look even more enchanting as it floated on the wind. Above the calm lake, a gentle breeze was blowing, making Duan Xinye's hair look even more enchanting as it floated on the wind. Duan Xinye was born in the imperial city and possessed a blood spirit, but her cultivation level wasn't high at all because her family didn't allow her to practice. Instead, they had taught her 4 arts: how to play the zither, how to play Go, calligraphy and painting. They wanted her to understand the basic affairs of human life, which had made her become the person she was at that moment. She had a detached temperament. Her father was also the ruler of the Shuiyu country and the head of the imperial clan. He had always told her that, in the future, her husband would be a great and heroic commander, which is why she didn't need to be powerful. She just needed to have the adequate personality. Therefore, her cultivation skills were fairly low. In the past, she had already met almost all the wealthy and noble young men from large clans except for a few people. These people were all the same to her. They met for the first time and immediately feigned feelings for her. She was sick and tired of those types of people. How was it possible to have feelings for someone when meeting them for the first time? The more people who courted her, the more sick and tired she felt. She just didn't show it, that's all. The same happened when Duan Xinye saw Lin Feng for the first time and saw his tattered clothes. She didn't like him much either. After all, he didn't need to wear magnificent clothes, but he should at least wear clean clothes. After that, she had noticed that Lin Feng was different. His facial expression was much different from the others. He just looked satisfied yet cold and indifferent. Besides, even though Lin Feng was wearing tattered clothes, he looked proud while in the middle of all these noble young men. He looked like he thought that he was on the same level or above many of them. Of course, the princess' impression after meeting Lin Feng for the first time wasn't the same as when she met others. She still had quite a good impression. But what Duan Xinye didn't understand was why Duan Wuya, her brother, who was very proud as well, had introduced Lin Feng to her. Could it be that Duan Wuya thought that Lin Feng would become someone with an incredible status? What Duan Xinye didn't understand, Lin Feng understood even less. He was uncertainly looking at Duan Wuya. After remaining silent for an instant, he said, "Your Highness, may I ask you a question?" Duan Wuya smiled and shook his head while saying, "You don't need to ask. You will know when the right time comes. You will clearly understand." Lin Feng, don't worry, if I made you come here, it's only to help you. At the moment, what you need is a high social status. High social status? Said Lin Feng in a low voice, stupefied. Indeed, a high social status. In the imperial city, many people want to kill you. Even though you have a friend at the Xian Qi layer, if these people really want to kill you, a cultivator of the Xian Qi layer will not be able to protect you anymore. Therefore, what you need now is a social status. As these people see it, a high social status is not enough to prevent them from harming me. Of course, if that social status is granted by your highness, it is different, said Lin Feng with a sharp expression in his eyes. If the second prince provided Lin Feng with a high social status, that would prove that he was one of the prince's people. Those who wanted to harm Lin Feng first had to think about how Duan Wuya would react. It's precisely how it is, said Duan Wuya while nodding and smiling yet not admitting it clearly. Thank you very much, Your Highness, said Lin Feng while slightly smiling. He didn't refuse the offer. Duan Wuya wanted to protect him, why would he refuse? At least, until that moment, Duan Wuya had never done anything harmful to Lin Feng. He had always been helping him. Lin Feng didn't refuse his goodwill for that reason. When Duan Wuya saw that Lin Feng was smiling, he understood that he was accepting his help. Lin Feng, there is something else for which I need to consult you regarding. Your Highness, how may I help? Asked Lin Feng very politely. Duan Wuya had used the word consult, but Lin Feng couldn't allow himself to look proud. Recently, in the Imperial City, we learned that the MOU country has been attacking us in Duanren City. The Celestial Academy intends to send some of its best students there to gain experience. This is a tradition in the Celestial Academy, especially for the military students. They have to spend time on a battlefield. This is the only way to acquire practical experience. Only those who have been on a battlefield can say that they are real military cultivators. Besides, the Holy Courtyard of Shuayu will also dispatch many of its students to Duanren City in order to put pressure on the Celestial Academy. Lin Feng, I hope that, this time, you will also be able to go to Duanren City and come back having accomplished outstanding military exploits. Duan Wuya was speaking slowly. A realization flashed in Lin Feng's eyes. Military exploits. Duan Wuya was a strict person. If Lin Feng could come back after having accomplished outstanding military exploits, he would provide Lin Feng with a high social status. With the right reputation, words carry weight. He was thus making sure to not harm his own reputation. Besides, the Holy Courtyard of Shuayu was going there along with the Celestial Academy, which meant that it was almost a competition between these two big schools. Lin Feng, only triumphant heroes who can proudly look at the masses from above can marry my sister, said Duan Wuya while smiling yet expressing a profound and meaningful message. I will go to Duanren City, said Lin Feng while nodding. Even if Duan Wuya hadn't told him, Lin Feng would have still gone to Duanren City. He needed to fight on a real battlefield. Besides, there were disciples of the Yunhai sect which had saved from the slave exchange. They also needed to gain experience on the battlefield. Lin Feng didn't want the disciples of the Yunhai sect to be considered as trash. There was also Han Man and Pajun who were on the battlefield. Lin Feng was wondering how things were there for them. Lu Fei also went back and visit her father, Lu Tsanglan. No matter what the reasons were, Lin Feng had to go to Duanren City. All right, said Duan Wuya while intensely nodding. He then smiled and said, Lin Feng, if you accomplish great military exploits, I will grant you the grade of officer. I will also give you the fief of Yangzhou City and you will be able to go back to your hometown as a triumphant hero. The fief of Yangzhou City. A city, Lin Feng was stupefied. Even though Yangzhou City was a small city and was just a small territory in the Shuayu country, owning even a small city would be enough to become extremely famous. Lin Feng was excited and was already impatient. If he became an officer and then returned to Yangzhou City with it under his control, it would be splendid to see the reactions of the Na Lan clan as well as the Lin clan. That would be truly splendid. If a former member of the Lin clan, who had been expelled, became the owner of Yangzhou City, the Lin clan would be ridiculed. That would be the biggest joke in the entire history of the city. Thank you very much, Your Highness, said Lin Feng while smiling indifferently. Your Highness, if you have nothing else to say, I will take my leave. All right, you can go, said Duan Wuya while nodding and smiling. Lin Feng slightly bowed. He slightly nodded at Duan Xianyi, turned around and then immediately left in a natural and unrestrained fashion. Duan Wuya and Duan Xinyi looked at Lin Feng's back. Immediately after, his silhouette vanished. Duan Wuya turned around, looked at Duan Xinyi and asked her, Xinyi, what do you think of Lin Feng? He is bright and courteous, replied Duan Xinyi, which made Duan Wuya smile. He then said, since when does my little sister try to change the subject? You should know that was not my question to you. Duan Xinyi looked at Duan Wuya and replied, he is strong and has high natural talent. He definitely stands out from all others. He is also stronger than these so-called nobles. Besides, he is courteous, wild and not conceited. His heart resembles that of a fierce tiger and he is extremely hot-blooded. Duan Wuya was stupefied by her answer. He then immediately smiled and said, it is the first time that I hear my little sister say such positive things about someone, but you're right, he has the potential to become a man of great talent. You would fit quite well with each other. Brother, don't tease me, said Duan Xinyi, sounding shy and embarrassed. She then added, besides, brother, if these are his only qualities, it will still not be enough for me to be with him. I know that you are never satisfied, replied Duan Wuya, not surprised. He smiled and said, of course, the one who will marry my sister will have to have an extraordinary social status. Even though Lin Feng, at birth, wasn't born with the same status, it didn't differ much from your own. At birth, replied Duan Xinyi, surprised, and asked, I thought he had no social status at all. He does, but it's just that nobody knows, replied Duan Wuya while laughing. Do you know why I invited him to come my banquet in the lovesick forest? Why? Asked Duan Xinyi, sounding curious. Because Lin Feng is her son, replied Duan Wuya. When Duan Xinyi heard Duan Wuya, she was astonished. Her son. The legendary woman of Shuiyu. The lovesick forest, only those who had a high social status and were extremely talented could go there. But who would have guessed that the creator of lovesick forest was a woman? Inside a mansion in the imperial city, there were loud and aggressive shouts, which spread through the atmosphere. Inside a mansion in the imperial city, there were loud and aggressive shouts, which spread through the atmosphere. At that moment, in the middle of the room stood a robust man. He looked at the crowd of people in front of him and shouted, "You're all a bunch of good-for-nothings." When the crowd of people heard him insulting them, ugly expressions appeared on their faces. A cold and sharp chi emerged in the atmosphere and rushed towards the robust man. "Blade!" shouted that robust man. He immediately raised his hand and released his blade energy. An illusionary blade appeared in the air. Boom! The person who was closest to the robust man was blown away and a bloody mist filled the air. That blade was ruthless. The others immediately rushed towards the robust man in an attack formation. They all looked cold and ruthless. They unsheathed their swords and thrust them at the robust man's heart. Blade! The robust man was standing tall and upright like a mountain. In the atmosphere, an incomparably strong blade force emerged. The most frightening thing was that above the robust man, an illusory blade was flashing. It was unceasingly absorbing blade energy from the atmosphere and was ready to attack anyone that approached. His entire body looked like an extremely strong blade. Anyone in his way would be killed. Immediately after, the whole crowd of people was blown backwards. They were trying to charge at the robust man, but they were all now lying on the floor even farther away from him. They were unable to get close to him. Blood was flowing endlessly onto the floor beneath them. From the beginning to the end, the robust man was standing in the same location. "All right," shouted a voice from behind the crowd. The crowd turned around and saw that someone had arrived. It was Lin Feng and he was smiling. Lin Feng hadn't thought that Ba Dao would train them with such brutality while he wasn't there. His methods were vicious and cruel. The blade energy around his body was piercingly sharp. These people hated Ba Dao to the bone, but of course, this was because he had been making them suffer every day. How could they not hate him to the bone? Ba Dao watched Lin Feng arrive. His pupils shrank while staring at Lin Feng, and he said, "You have broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer. I broke through to the 6th Ling Chi layer recently. Now I am at the same level as you, said Lin Feng while nodding. These Yunhai sect disciples were astonished. Surprisingly, Ba Dao and Lin Feng's cultivation were both at the same level. How powerful. Back in the days at the Yunhai sect, they remembered that Lin Feng had broken through to the 2nd Ling Chi layer. A year hadn't passed, yet he had already broken through to the 6th Ling Chi layer. His cultivation speed was terrifying. For ordinary people with ordinary talent who had broken through to the Ling Chi layer, it required at least 1 to several years to break through to the next one. Lin Feng's natural talent was too monstrous. But Ba Dao's strength was also unfathomable and mysterious. It seemed like Ba Dao could even defeat people of the 7th Ling Chi layer. Even though Lin Feng was at a similar cultivation level, his strength couldn't be compared with that of Ba Dao. Ba Dao was staring at Lin Feng. Surprisingly, a sharp qi emerged from his body and moved towards Lin Feng. Lin Feng was a bit surprised but then smiled and said, "You want to try against me?" "Yes," said Ba Dao while slightly nodding. Ba Dao had practiced the skill Tyrannical Blade. He was perfectly aware that he had become stronger. Before, nobody of the 6th Ling Chi dared fight against him. At that moment, he had become even stronger and was convinced that he could defeat any cultivator of the 7th Ling Chi layer. Therefore, when he saw that Lin Feng had broken through to the 6th Ling Chi layer and the battle energy that was emerging from his body, he felt like comparing their strength. "Alright, we can have an exchange," replied Lin Feng while smiling. The disciples of the Yunhai sect were stupefied. Excitement appeared in their eyes. Such a battle! Who was going to be victorious? The robust and strong Ba Dao or the genius of the Yunhai sect, the new patriarch, Lin Feng? Ba Dao and Lin Feng were fixedly gazing at each other. At that moment, a powerful blade energy spread in the atmosphere. The blade was truly a powerful weapon. Ba Dao loved blades and he had a blade spirit. The tyrannical blade that Lin Feng had given to him was truly terrifying in his hands. The blade energy that he was releasing emitted whistling sounds as it chopped through the air. The disciples of the Yunhai sect had the feeling that their bodies were being drowned in an endless ocean of blade energy and that they would be cut into pieces at any moment. How terrifying! When he was fighting against us, he was hiding his real power. The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. It seemed like Lin Feng would be unable to win against Ba Dao. That blade energy could easily kill a cultivator of the 6th Ling Chi layer. One blade attack would be enough. Even though the crowd knew that Lin Feng had extremely high natural talent, they doubted the fact that he could resist Ba Dao's attacks. At that moment, an insanely powerful battle energy emerged from Lin Feng's body, and in the blink of an eye, it was already at a level that could compete with Ba Dao's blade energy. Lin Feng was intensely staring at Ba Dao. His body was covered with battle energy. It seemed like he was going to attack at any moment. A hurricane-like wind moved towards Lin Feng, which made his tattered clothes flutter. He was standing there like an invincible, unmoving rock. How powerful! In the middle of Ba Dao's blade force, Lin Feng was just standing there. He wasn't moving backwards at all. He was just as strong as Ba Dao. At that moment, Ba Dao started to move. In a flash, his blade energy struck the floor and a deep crack appeared as if it had been cut by a blade. The blade is the weapon of the kings. Divine protection and divine attacks, said Ba Dao. After expressing his opinion about blades, an even stronger blade energy spread through the air. The entire crowd had the feeling that they were suffocating under the pressure. The whistling sounds were growing more intense and occurring much more often. I understand why Tyrannical Blade is a skill of the D level. The blade energy emerging from his body is incredibly powerful, thought Lin Feng. At that moment, Ba Dao's entire body was like a giant blade that had just been unsheathed. Boom! Lin Feng took a step forwards. His battle energy didn't decrease, and on the contrary, it became even stronger. It looked like it was overcoming the heavens and the earth. The sword is the weapon of the emperor, it can pierce even the heavens. Lin Feng used a similar description to that of Ba Dao. Lin Feng's force spread in the atmosphere like a brutal flood. Force. Sword force. It could destroy and annihilate everything in its path. In a flash, his sword force fused with his battle energy and spread through the air. The crowd was astonished. Indeed, Ba Dao could use blade force, but Lin Feng could use sword force. His sword was made for destruction. Not only was Lin Feng's sword force extremely powerful, but his battle energy was terrifying too. The blade energy, as well as the sword and battle energy, was filling the atmosphere, and suddenly, they collided against each other. There were small crackling noises as the energies clashed. How terrifying! At that moment, the backs of the Yunhai sect disciples were covered with cold sweat. Ba Dao was monstrously strong, but Lin Feng was not any weaker. They hadn't even started fighting yet and the people in the crowd already had their clothes soaked with sweat. They were uncontrollably shaking and retreating. Ba Dao and Lin Feng were still staring at each other. A long time seemed to have elapsed and a light flashed through Ba Dao's eyes. At that moment, his blade energy slowly started to vanish. On the other hand, Lin Feng's sword energy continued moving forwards. Ba Dao suddenly looked surprised and slowly opened his mouth. I admit defeat. When he finished talking, the blade force around his body instantly disappeared. Lin Feng's sword and battle energy also disappeared. After all the energy disappeared, the crowd started to relax and they all took a deep breath. Their hearts were all pounding. Lin Feng was terrifying and was even stronger than Ba Dao. No wonder he had become the patriarch of the Yunhai sect. Ba Dao, now your blade force has become extremely monstrous. Wait until you have a breakthrough in force mastery. Lin Feng said this while smiling. They had not taken that battle seriously, as they were just testing each other. Ba Dao was clearly not as strong as Lin Feng. When Ba Dao heard Lin Feng, he was stupefied. He stared at him and said, "You have already broken through to the next force mastery?" "A while ago," replied Lin Feng calmly. Ba Dao was dumbstruck. Lin Feng could already use energy attacks. What a terrifying young man. Fortunately, Lin Feng had never challenged him in the prisoner arena, otherwise, he would not have kept his undefeated record. "Ba Dao, I came here to tell you to get prepared. We may have to travel to join the war at any moment," said Lin Feng indifferently, and then he immediately looked at the Yunhai sect disciples. He then said, "You guys should always listen to Ba Dao and train hard. If you do, your chances of surviving on the battlefield will be better." When Lin Feng finished talking, he turned around and left at full speed. His horse, surprisingly, was a dragon colt horse, a horse of extremely high quality. On the young man's left and right, there was a single person on each side. One of them was a girl wearing a fine veil on her face. She looked holy and pure, like a celestial being. On his other side was a beautiful woman. She looked heroic and vigorous. But many people were astonished when they saw the young man on the dragon colt horse. It was Lin Feng. These days, at the Celestial Academy, people who didn't know his name were rare. The fact that he was appearing at that moment was amazing. Lin Feng was also going to Duanren City. He was personally going to go to the battlefield. Besides, two beautiful women were following him. "You arrived," said Wen Ao Shui while smiling at Lin Feng. Lin Feng nodded to Wen Ao Shui. Of course he had arrived, he was leaving as well. At that moment, that noble military man, Luo Yu, looked at Lin Feng and said in a low voice, "Lin Feng." Lin Feng looked at Luo Yu wondering who he was. He didn't know him. "What's the problem?" asked Lin Feng. "Nothing," said Luo Yu while shaking his head. He then continued, "You defeated Hei Mo only because you're lucky. I hope that, on the battlefield, you will remain that lucky because it is not a place where you can just play around." When he finished talking, Luo Yu turned around, didn't look at Lin Feng again and started moving. Lucky? Lin Feng was stupefied. He defeated Hei Mo because he was lucky? Lin Feng laughed and shouted at Luo Yu, "Same for you, it would be a great shame if you didn't come back alive." When Luo Yu heard Lin Feng, he stopped his horse. He released a cold energy from his body which moved towards Lin Feng. At the same time, he turned around and galloped towards Lin Feng at full speed while punching towards Lin Feng, which emitted a strong whistling noise as it pierced through the air. Boom! Lin Feng's horse neighed and Lin Feng flew up in the air before landing on the ground. There was blood on the corner of his mouth. He then kicked the dragon colt horse, which had immediately fell down onto the ground while unceasingly neighing, causing him to be dismounted. From the moment when Lin Feng had talked and the end of that attack, only a short moment had elapsed. Luo Yu's attack had been like a storm, quick and perfect. While looking at Lin Feng, Luo Yu laughed coldly and said, "Did you think that I was like Mo and that you could act so impudently in front of me?" The crowd was astonished and amazed by Luo Yu's move. He was so strong. Even though Lin Feng was monstrously gifted and could defeat Mo, the difference with Luo Yu was gigantic. Luo Yu was the 7th-ranked student of the Celestial Academy. Mo and him were very different. Luo Yu didn't need to use a special skill to have the strength of the 7th Qi layer. At that moment, the crowd saw Lin Feng standing with blood on the corner of his mouth. He was standing perfectly straight and a glow emerged around his body. In his hand appeared a sword which glowed with a silvery white light. It looked extremely sharp. It was absorbing sword energy as if it was alive. An incredible amount of battle energy spread in the atmosphere from Lin Feng's body. It was extremely sharp and powerful. Everybody was instantly terrified. Besides, inside that battle energy, there was sword qi. The crowd was stupefied and looking at Lin Feng in a strange way. Lin Feng surprisingly wanted to fight. Luo Yu frowned while looking at Lin Feng. He was surprised. He only saw that Lin Feng was walking slowly. In the blink of an eye, the battle energy as well as the sword qi immediately emerged and pierced through the air at full speed, moving straight towards Luo Yu. At that moment, a loud neighing sound spread in the air. Luo Yu's horse had felt the energy and was terrified. It immediately fell onto the ground and started crawling. Luo Yu's body was thrown onto the ground. "You cowardly animal!" coldly shouted Luo Yu. He immediately attacked like a madman. His horse neighed and immediately after, its heart twitched, it wasn't moving anymore. Immediately after, Luo Yu raised his head and looked at Lin Feng. An extremely cold expression could be seen in his eyes. Without saying anything, Lin Feng walked towards Luo Yu and when he arrived in front of him then raised his sword above his head. An extremely powerful combination of battle energy, sword energy and deadly energy filled the air. The hearts of the people in the crowd were pounding. It seemed like Lin Feng had become much stronger in comparison with when he fought against Mo, much, much stronger. Lin Feng hadn't stuck with his sword yet, but the sword energy was already enough to make the heart of the people in the crowd beat faster. Each of Lin Feng's actions was enough to astonish them. "Die!" Lin Feng said one word and swung his sword in a downwards arc towards Luo Yu. It seemed like that sword was going to reach Luo Yu's body at any moment. Deadly qi waves were rolling in the air like a black cloud. Luo Yu looked concentrated, a terrifying qi emerged from his body. When he saw Lin Feng's sword approaching him, Luo Yu raised his hands out of which a bright and resplendent white light emerged. A terrifying strength flowed from within his hands. Sirrr, a distinct cracking sound spread through the air. The bright white light disintegrated under Lin Feng's sword. The silver deadly sword immediately continued moving towards Luo Yu. Luo Yu's facial expression finally changed. He was dumbstruck. He heavily stepped on the ground and raised both of his hands. He quickly moved backwards. That sword caught his face, leaving a thread of blood down his face. That sword had nearly cut him into two. But Luo Yu didn't have the time to take a breath, he just saw Lin Feng flicker and come towards him again. That deadly sword was rushing towards him again. Lin Feng and his sword were the same, expressionless and cold. It made Luo Yu's heart feel extreme dread. He moved again. Luo, you didn't dare approach Lin Feng's sword. The sword has both battle and deadly energy fusing together. Each time, Lin Feng's attacks were filled with what seemed like endless power. He moved again. Luo, you didn't dare approach Lin Feng's sword. The sword has both battle and deadly energy fusing together. Each time, Lin Feng's attacks were filled with what seemed like endless power. Luo Yu would get pierced right through if he approached too near to Lin Feng's sword. His heart was filled with remorse. He hadn't thought that Lin Feng would be so strong. Luo Yu had broken through to the 7th Ling Qi layer. If he wanted to attack someone, he did it without thinking much about their retaliation. Boom! Lin Feng pierced the atmosphere at incredible speed. An extremely sharp and violent wind emerged. A horse in the distance neighed and was surprisingly caught by the wind and was cut into pieces while the person who was thrown backwards. He was breathing heavily, but he didn't dare say a word. He feared that Lin Feng would attack him if he did. That person had seen what happened with Luo Yu and Lin Feng with his own eyes. Luo Yu had attacked Lin Feng while being very aggressive towards him, but Lin Feng hadn't bothered to waste any words on him. He had immediately started talking with his sword, and at that moment, Luo Yu was in a critical situation. Lin Feng was really going to kill him. When seeing that, how could a person willingly provoke Lin Feng? They did not have death wishes. Lin Feng's deadly sword was quickly piercing through the air. The battle energy emerging from his body was becoming stronger with each passing moment. He looked cold and expressionless as he was carrying out his sword strikes. Luo Yu didn't have a single chance to strike back against him. At that moment, Luo Yu looked extremely pale. He was surprisingly struggling to keep his life, and on top of that, in front of so many people. "Ah!" shouted Luo Yu furiously. His clothes were still fluttering through the air. He looked furious and ice-cold. "What the hell are you doing?" coldly asked Lin Feng when he heard Luo Yu shout. He then continued striking with his sword. All of the energy within the atmosphere suddenly disappeared. Luo Yu was surprised, but suddenly looked extremely happy. He then released an extremely powerful energy along with his spirit, which appeared behind him. However, at that moment, Luo Yu had a bad premonition which made his heart beat faster. There wasn't any sword force anymore, but that sword seemed even more dangerous than before. The battle energy from moments before had also disappeared. Luo Yu quickly retreated at full speed. Crrrrssh, Luo Yu had barely avoided the sword, but the energy had struck him. Luo Yu's clothes were torn and there was blood pouring from his chest and a wound on his throat. It was a shocking sight. The crowd was astonished. What a sharp sword, what a terrifying and strong strength. Luo Yu lowered his head and looked at his own chest. Immediately after, a hideous expression appeared on his face. He raised his head and looked at Lin Feng again. Flames of rage were burning in his eyes. However, Lin Feng looked as cold as before. He raised his sword again as he spoke. "I am going to personally kill you." Luo Yu was shocked. He turned around and started retreating at full speed. He didn't feeling like fighting against Lin Feng any longer anymore. Lin Feng laughed coldly. He moved forward and used his sword to strike towards Luo Yu again. When Luo Yu felt the deadly energy approaching from behind, he gnashed his teeth. In spite of the fact that he was insanely shaking, he continued running away like mad. What a shameless and cowardly dog, to run after talking arrogantly. Lin Feng didn't continue chasing him. While holding his sword towards Luo Yu, he shouted, "I don't think that you can be compared with Heimo. In my eyes, you cannot even come close to Heimo. Pray that we never cross paths again." When Luo Yu heard Lin Feng's words, his injuries started to bleed heavily as his heart pounded with fury and fear at the same time. It seemed like the state of his wounds were quite serious, but he didn't dare to stop running. He continued running away like mad into the distance. When Luo Yu's silhouette disappeared, the crowd's eyes fell upon Lin Feng. They were astonished and amazed. On that day, when Lin Feng had fought against Heimo, the crowd did not see that Lin Feng had almost killed Heimo. However, at that moment, they had clearly seen that Luo Yu, who was even more powerful and arrogant, decided to offend Lin Feng and immediately after injured him. Lin Feng did not continue with his words and instead used his sword, and the result was that Luo Yu, who considered himself above Lin Feng, had run away like a coward. 2 months after defeating He Mo, Lin Feng had defeated a military student of the 7th Ling Qi layer. Lin Feng's natural talent was monstrous. Lin Feng sheathed his sword and immediately returned to his colt dragon horse. He then said indifferently, "Let's go." These army troops nodded to the order, and immediately after, everybody started galloping at full speed and disappeared from the crowd's vision. But that insane battle from a moment ago was still in their minds. The area outside of the northern gate of the imperial city was desolate. The ground was filled with yellowish mud without any grass. The northern gate of the city wasn't a normal gate. People couldn't go through it as they pleased. In times of peace, only those who had received a military order could go through that gate. In that depopulated and desolate place, there were many tents. They had been set up by the military troops. The area was incredibly vast. There was a crowd of people that had gathered outside of the tents, about 100 meters away. Amongst them were the noble cultivators, military troops, and certain military troops wearing silver armor. All of these noble cultivators belonged to the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. They were heading to war so they could acquire knowledge and battle experience. Their future would be even better if they achieved military merits. Of course, many people were going to there to acquire battle experience and to become stronger through life and death situations. Those types of people were both hot-blooded and courageous. Throom, throom, throom. From a distance they could already hear the galloping of horses. The ground was shaking. The people in the crowd outside of the tents could already distinctly feel the ground shake. A short time after, they could already see a large group of people heading towards them. They have arrived. The crowd outside of the tents was looking at the newcomers with a sharp expression in their eyes. At the same time, amongst the crowd outside of the tents, a young man who was sitting on the seat of the general stood up and went to welcome the newcomers. He had a warm smile on his face. The newcomers got down off their horses when they saw the young man who was coming towards them to welcome them. They all kneeled down and shouted, "Your Highness. You have gone through many hardships to be here," said the young man to these people while smiling and nodding. He waved his hands as a gesture that they could stand up. They were all scared. Their hearts were racing. Even though His Highness was a prince, he wasn't arrogant at all and was very easy to get along with. He was also very polite to these ordinary military troops. "Your Highness," said one of the members of the Celestial Academy very loudly. Duan Wuya smiled at the crowd and said, "Everybody, I am lucky that you have come to fight with me. This is truly a stroke of luck. Don't mention it, Your Highness. Come, let's sit. I'll give the instructions to the troops and then we can go." Duan Wuya politely while he showed everyone where they could sit. Everybody had an attributed seating area. The people of the Celestial Academy could sit on the right. There was a great number of seats laid out for them. The people of the Celestial Academy sat down. At that moment, many people were sharply glaring at them, which surprised them. Opposite them were the people from the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. At that moment, Lin Feng was also looking at the people from the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. When he noticed that many people were looking at him, he narrowed his eyes. Duan Han, Yu Tian Chen, Lin Qian, he could recognize many people amongst them. The military apprentices of the Celestial Academy were not the only people who wanted to go to war. There were also some noble cultivators, as well as some ordinary cultivators who wanted to go to war to enhance their path of cultivation. It would enable them to have an official career and to rapidly rise up in the world. Relying on their strength and efforts, they would be able to return home as triumphant heroes. But Lin Feng clearly felt that someone was staring at him with an even sharper glare. It wasn't an ordinary person from the crowd, it was their leader. He was sitting next to Duan Wuya. Duan Tianlang. When Lin Feng saw that their leader Duan Tianlang was the one who was staring dagger at him, he was astonished. Duan Tianlang, apart from being a member of the Duan clan, he was also now the commander-in-chief of the country. Officers and soldiers gradually arrived at the military drill ground in their formations. There wasn't any disorder, in the slightest degree. Only the sound of their synchronized march and of the clanging noises from their armor could be heard. Officers and soldiers gradually arrived at the military drill ground in their formations. There wasn't any disorder, in the slightest degree. Only the sound of their synchronized march and of the clanging noises from their armor could be heard. Lin Feng's heart started to beat faster when he saw the officers and soldiers within the military drill ground. He looked as far as his eyes could see and saw that there were 3 large groups of soldiers which gradually turned into 3 huge square-shaped formations. There wasn't the slightest iota of chaos. The light from the sun shining on their armor was dazzling. There were 3 different colors shining throughout the formation. The armor of these soldiers were 3 different colors: bronze, silver and gold. The gold-armored soldiers were the highest ranked while the bronze-armored soldiers were the lowest of rank. That was clear from just a glance. Duan Tianlang's armor was pitch black. He looked like the devourer of souls. His attire was filled with endless coldness and austerity. He looked intimidating and majestic. Clang, clang, clang. The marching sounds of the soldiers rose and fell in succession. A row of bronze-armored soldiers lifted their war drums and walked forwards. The war drums were so heavy that 4 bronze-armored soldiers were required to lift a single drum. Boom! A deep sound spread through the atmosphere. The front row of bronze-armored soldiers lifted up the war drums and moved towards the other soldiers. Then the second row of bronze-armored soldiers did the same. When the drums hit the floor, however, there was a huge crashing sound followed by a slight tremor. In total, there were 5 rows and each of them had 9 war drums. What is that? Lin Feng was surprised. He didn't know what these bronze-armored soldiers were doing with the war drums. However, other people were indifferently watching the scene as if it was completely normal. Excitement also sparkled in all of their eyes. Today, the students of 2 big institutions as well as some other student cultivators have joined us in this war. We beat these drums for all the students. Besides, there is something else I want to announce today. Duan Tianlang will be joining us, as the chief commander. My sister, Duan Xinyi, will be joining as vice chief commander. She will also be present on the battlefield. Today, it is for all these people that we beat the drums. Besides, the people who can make more drum beats than the others can become the protectors of Princess Duan Xinyi, said Duan Wuya. Immediately after, from the middle of the troops, a beautiful silhouette appeared. Even though she was wearing armor, one could see her beautiful figure. That was the Imperial Princess Duan Xinyi. The crowd was surprised. The Princess Duan Xinyi was acting as the vice chief commander. What was the reason she had come to this battle? Regardless of the reason why things had turned out this way, these young men were excited. The ones who could make the most drum beats could become the princess' personal guards, which meant that they would constantly be accompanying her. Such opportunities were really rare. Lin Feng seemed perplexed. Duan Tianlang was the chief commander. Lin Feng didn't understand what relations there were between Duan Wuya and Duan Tianlang. Besides, Duan Xinyi was the vice chief commander. What was this supposed to mean? 5 people, who will come first? Shouted Duan Tianlang. Immediately after, silhouettes flickered and immediately arrived in front of the war drums while saying, I am willing to start first. In the blink of an eye, there was a great deal of people in front of the war drums. 5 people moved at the same time. They released an incredible quantity of piercingly cold qi. Boom! Someone brutally punched the war drum, which emitted a slight buzzing sound, but it didn't emit the sound of a drumbeat. Besides, some energy bounced from it and was reflected back to the attack, which knocked them backwards. At that moment, that person looked extremely embarrassed and blushed. They lowered their head and went back to their seat. They had been unable to make the drums beat. The second person looked imposing and majestic. With an insane strength, he punched at one drum which emitted a buzzing sound and then a light cracking beat. That person looked very excited. Without stopping at all, he directly moved to another drum and punched it. It made a crackle sound again, which filled people with enthusiasm. Making the war drums emit any sounds was already extremely difficult. Making the drums emit even cracking sounds could improve the soldiers' morale. Only those who had a high status like the officers would be able to beat war drums. Those who could make the most drums beats would be adored by both officers and soldiers. But that same man didn't manage to make the third war drum emit a sound. The man suddenly looked dispirited and depressed. After that, the third person managed to make 3 drums emit a sound. The fourth person managed to make 2 drums emit sound, and the fifth person also only managed to make only 3 drums emit sound. They then went back to their respective seats. The bronze-armored soldiers put the war drums back in order. As before, there were 5 rows of soldiers with 9 war drums in each row. Lin Feng looked pensive and was intensely gazing at the war drums. He had the impression that these war drums followed a regular pattern. In other words, he had the impression they matched a person's cultivation level. For example, someone of the second Ling Qi layer could make 2 drums beat, someone of the third could make 3 drums beat, so making 9 war drums beat required to be at the 9th Ling Qi layer. Of course, it didn't seem to be an absolute rule either. A moment ago, someone of the 3rd Ling Qi layer had only made 2 drums beat while the first one was only at the 1st Ling Qi layer and hadn't managed to make any drum emit a sound. "Next one," said Duan Wuya while smiling at the crowd. "I'll go," said Yuan Shan, who was sitting next to Lin Feng while standing up and going towards the war drums. "Yuan Shan, brother, I'll go too," said Duan Feng following Yuan Shan. A short moment after, 5 people had gathered around the drums. Amongst these 5 people, the strongest one had broken through to the 4th Ling Qi layer. They managed to make 4 drums beat and then walked away while smiling. Yuan Shan was at the 3rd Ling Qi layer and managed to make 3 drums beat. Besides, Duan Feng managed to surprise everybody. He had broken through to the 2nd Ling Qi layer but managed to make 3 drums beat as well. Many people started looking at him with new eyes. Many people tried, but the best person could make only 4 drums beat. At that moment, a silhouette stood up and said to the students of the Celestial Academy, "I am Tu Fu of the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu. Who will accompany me?" Tu Fu, when Lin Feng saw that big guy, he was astonished. They used to be fellow sect disciples in the past. Tu Fu also used to be from the Yunhai sect. Now, he was a student at the Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu. The crowd was suddenly interested. The Holy Courtyard of Shuiyu had started provoking the students of the Celestial Academy. "Are there only cowards at the Celestial Academy?" said Tu Fu when he saw that nobody was replying to him. He couldn't help but laugh. "Not only are you a shameless turncoat but you also dare to speak such nonsense," said Lin Feng coldly, surprising Tu Fu, who immediately looked at him. "The winners can have a prosperous life while the losers can only die. The weak are the prey of the strong. That is the main rule on the path of cultivation. When Duan Tianlang annihilated the Yunhai sect, of course I followed him." "That is just common sense," shouted Tu Fu coldly. Then, while staring at Lin Feng, he added, "Lin Feng, if you want to join the Holy Courtyard, you can go and beg Duan Tianlang, maybe then he will take care of you." "Oh, you have now become a cowardly turncoat whose devotion to righteousness really inspires reverence," said Lin Feng coldly while looking at Tu Fu. He then turned around, looked at someone wearing a bronze mask and said, "You go." "All right," replied the person wearing the bronze mask, while slightly nodding. He then looked at Tu Fu and said, "I am coming." When he finished talking, his silhouette instantly appeared in front of the war drums. Tu Fu's facial expression was gloomy. He then quickly arrived next to the war drums and said, "Who will start?" "You can start," indifferently said the person wearing the bronze mask. Tu Fu slightly nodded, his silhouette started moving and immediately moved forwards. Boom! A drum beat spread through the air, resonating in people's ears. The war drum had been smashed into pieces. Tu Fu was unceasingly moving, insanely punching the war drums. The second and the third war drums were instantly crushed, emitting explosion sounds in the air. Ah! Tu Fu had used one breath to do that. He shouted loudly and continued punching. The fourth war drum was crushed. Crack! Tu Fu's was violently stepping on the ground as he punched the drums. He then made a beat from the fifth war drum, which nobody had managed to do until that moment. After, as if Tu Fu had a surplus of strength, moved towards the sixth war drum. CRR, CRRR, the sixth war drum was unceasingly vibrating, but at that moment, his strength bounced on the war drum and blew Tu Fu's body 100 meters backwards, but there was already a small crack on the war drum as well. Fifth Ling Chi layer and almost made the sixth one emit a beat. Worth being called a former disciple of the Yunhai sect. Too bad that he's a shameless turncoat, said Lin Feng in a low voice when he saw the crack that appeared on the sixth war drum. A cultivator of the fifth Ling Chi layer was nothing in Lin Feng's eyes. Ba Dao was going to teach him a good lesson. Everybody was looking at Tu Fu. Even though he was pushed back by the last war drum attempt, nobody was going to look down on him. Being able to emit a cracking noise from the sixth drum was already a great performance. Everybody was looking at Tu Fu. Even though he was pushed back by the last war drum attempt, nobody was going to look down on him. Being able to emit a cracking noise from the sixth drum was already a great performance. The people of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu were looking at Ba Dao with cold smiles on their faces. They wanted to see how the man, who was wearing a bronze mask, was supposed to compete with Tu Fu. At that moment, Ba Dao moved in front of a war drum. He looked calm and mystical. An incredible blade energy rose from his body. The crowd was stupefied. Immediately after, they only saw Ba Dao's fist move towards the first war drum. Boom! A clear sound spread in the air. However, it didn't sound brutal and explosive at all. The war drum looked like a bean curd that had been split open by a blade. Immediately after, he struck the second, then the third and the fourth one. He had easily made them beat. From the beginning, Ba Dao had done this in a single breath. He moved straight towards the fifth one, slightly raised his hand and immediately after cut it into two distinct parts which flew away. As before, he looked relaxed and detached. The scariest part was that Ba Dao looked like a blade that would cut through anything, even before arriving at the sixth drum. Ka-cha! Looking like a terrifying blade, Ba Dao cut the sixth war drum. As before, it looked easy for him to emit the beat and it seemed like he had destroyed those six drums in a single fluid movement, without taking a second breath. At that moment, Ba Dao stopped. He didn't move towards the seventh war drum and no longer looked interested. He calmly turned around and walked back towards the people of the Celestial Academy. A piece of trash dares to act so arrogantly, said Ba Dao indifferently. Everybody was astonished. That guy surprisingly dared to call Tu Fu a piece of trash. However, in comparison with Ba Dao, Tu Fu was extremely weak indeed. Tu Fu pulled a long face and the color drained from his cheeks. In the past, he used to be considered as a genius within the Yunhai sect. He used to consider himself as an amazing cultivator. At the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, he was considered as an important student, but at that moment, he was being humiliated and had no way to refute Ba Dao. He had needed his maximal strength to make a crack appear in the sixth war drum, but Ba Dao had easily been able to make it beat as he split it in two. The difference between the two of them was gigantic. Not bad, said Duan Wuya while smiling. He then continued, are there any stronger ones out there? The people in the crowd were looking at each other in dismay. After that, many others stood up to test their strength. They all tried, but eventually, they all failed, unable to even reach the sixth war drum. Ling Hu, you are one the strongest here, why don't you go and destroy their honor? At that moment, on the side of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu, Tu Fu said while looking at Ling Hu Hishan. Ling Hu Hishan used to be a disciple of the Yunhai sect, so he and Tu Fu had a good relationship. Ling Huishan slightly shook his head and looked at the crowd on the other side. That guy in white clothes, his name is Wen Ao Shua. He is ranked third at the Celestial Academy. He's discreet and his strength is unfathomable. I hadn't thought that he would come as well, so now I am not entirely sure that I can win. Ling Huishan's words stupefied Tu Fu. Immediately after, he walked towards Wen Ao Shua, who was as beautiful as woman, and saw that these two enigmatic eyes were also looking towards him. They looked like dazzling diamonds. Tu Fu didn't dare look at them anymore. Amongst those who came to the battlefield, the strongest student of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu was Ling Huishan. If Ling Huishan took action, Wen Ao Shua would inevitably get involved, and if Lin Huishan was defeated, the holy courtyard of Shuiyu would lose face. Therefore, Ling Huishan wasn't absolutely certain about the result of a potential confrontation and preferred not to get involved. I will help gain back our prestige, said someone on the side of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu. That young man was Yu Tianchen. Yu Tianchen stood up, looked at Duan Wuya and Duan Xinyi and said, "Your Highness, I am obviously the one who should protect the princess. Nobody else can even pretend to be better suited than me," said Yu Tianchen in an extremely arrogant tone. Everybody could see that Yu Tianchen believed the logic of his words. Yu Tianchen was a member of the Yu clan and he had an extremely high social status. Besides, he was also extremely strong, already reaching the 7th Ling Qi layer and possessed a terrifying spirit to match. Many people, who were stronger than him, didn't dare to provoke him, while those who were weaker than him were only there to be bullied. Duan Xinyi lowered her head without saying anything, whereas Duan Wuya faintly smiled and said, "Well, let's see how many war drums you can handle, brother." Yu Tianchen slightly nodded but didn't walk towards the drums. Instead, he looked at the students of the Celestial Academy, in particular in Lin Feng's direction, and said, "In order to be in a relationship with a princess, no matter if you're a cultivation genius or if you were born from a noble family, you need to stand at the absolute peak. Those who have a low social status and an overrated strength are just nobodies. When they think that they have a chance to win the heart of the princess, it truly is the funniest thing in the world. Those types of people can keep dreaming." When he finished, he walked towards the drums. The crowd was looking at Lin Feng with a strange look. Even though Yu Tianchen hadn't mentioned any names, he was clearly talking about Lin Feng. Lin Feng was trying to gain relations with the princess? At that moment, Lin Feng was dumbstruck. His facial expression looked slightly cold. Lin Feng had an exaggerated strength and was interested in the princess? At that moment, Yu Tianchen said, "Today, I would like to sing a song for the princess." When he finished talking, Tian Yuchen's deep and low voice spread through the air. Men and officers of the vast and boundless Shuiyu, beat the drums and sound the gongs. Boom! An explosion followed Yu Tianchen's song as the first war drum beat. Lords and nobles wearing armor and inspiring ambitions. Boom! With a single explosive beat he destroyed 2 war drums. A hot-blooded man surrounded by lakes and mountains. Yu Tianchen's voice was deep. The energy he was releasing matched the feeling of hot-blooded behavior. He continued to punch the next drums. The 4th and the 5th war drums exploded into pieces. Not only was it Yu Tianchen's first breath, but he still had plenty of air in his lungs. Achieving 1,000 heroic merits. Yu Tianchen continued walking forwards. It seemed like his entire body was defying the laws of space and time and that his strength could annihilate everything in his path. An incredibly loud explosion sound filled the atmosphere and the 6th war drum exploded. At that moment, Yu Tianchen stamped on the ground like a madman. The yellow muddy ground seemed to create a terrible wave of earth as it rippled away from his foot. Yu Tianchen's fist crashed onto the 7th war drum. "Just to be welcomed back as a hero by a beautiful woman," continued Yu Tianchen in his deep singing voice. Finally, he had run out of air from his first breath. A cracking sound emerged in the atmosphere as the 7th war drum was smashed into 5 pieces. Lords and nobles wearing armor and inspiring ambitions. A hot-blooded man surrounded by lakes and mountains. The people in the crowd were listening to these words while looking at that handsome young man. Their hearts were pounding and it seemed like the blood in their veins had been ignited with the passion for battle. The officers and soldiers were especially enthusiastic and excited. Each and every single one of them had excitement in their eyes as if they were seeing themselves as the man from the song. All right. All the people of the holy courtyard were supporting Yu Tianchen. On his seat, Duan Tianlang was slightly smiling as well and said, Yu Tianchen deserves to be a member of the Yu clan. His heart is filled with great aspirations. Relying on a single breath, he was able to chant and at the same time make 7 drums beat. Such people are a rarity. He would be a perfect match for the princess. He had required only 1 breath to sing his song and make 7 war drums beat. Yu Tianchen hadn't paused for even a moment, he had been singing heartily as he attacked the war drums. It required much more energy than just attacking. After all, he only had a single breath. Yu Tianchen turned around and slightly nodded towards Duan Tianlang. Immediately after, he walked towards Duan Xinyi and warmly smiled at her. Duan Xinyi also smiled in response while remaining as silent as before. Not bad, said Duan Wuya while smiling and nodding. I wouldn't have thought that Brother Yu was as talented as he was creative. That is indeed very rare. I am just some nobody. Your Highness, you're flattering me, said Yu Tianchen with a proud smile on his face. He then immediately glanced towards Lin Feng. In his eyes, perhaps Lin Feng had already become a potential rival. To be more accurate, you are not even some nobody, you are even lower, you are a piece of shit, said a loud voice with a cold and indifferent tone. The crowd was astonished, a piece of shit. Then everybody turned towards the person who was speaking, it was precisely Lin Feng. That guy, how audacious, thought the crowd. When he heard those words, Yu Tianchen narrowed his eyes and coldly looked at Lin Feng. He smiled coldly and said, all right, if I'm a piece of shit, would you want to try? That's exactly what I was planning, said Lin Feng while smiling indifferently. In the continent of the 9 clouds, many people were much stronger than him, but Lin Feng was probably one of the most creative people. Lin Feng stood up and started walking slowly towards the drums. He arrived in front of the war drums. The crowd was stupefied. Lin Feng was serious about trying to beat 7 drums. The crowd was already growing impatient. They wanted to see how strong and talented Lin Feng was. However, being stronger than Yu Tianchen wasn't very likely. Duan Wuya and Duan Xinyi were impatiently looking at Lin Feng, wondering what his plan was. I want to see if you can make 7 drums beat while singing, said Yu Tianchen while smiling coldly. He was fixedly staring at Lin Feng. It was impossible for Lin Feng to beat him, he would just end up humiliating himself. Lin Feng closed his eyes and took a deep breath. A beautiful melody suddenly came from his mouth. The crowd was shocked as their hearts started to race with excitement. In a towering rage, I rest under the whistling sound of rain. In a towering rage, I rest under the whistling sound of rain. The sound of his solemn and serene voice could be heard as he took a few steps forward. With piercingly cold sword chi around his body, he punched the first war drum and immediately annihilated it without leaving a single trace. It was only his first attack and the crowd was already stupefied. What powerful sword chi! Gazing into the distance, looking up to the heavens, I utter a long and loud cry. My chest feels painful. Lin Feng's loud and melodious voice resonated in the people's ears. That song had caused them to imagine a hero holding his sword, in a towering rage on the battlefield. Boom! The another war drum was also destroyed without leaving trace. 30 soldiers now with the dust and earth, the moon and the clouds stretching as far as can see. The young man's hair turned white, he is filled with sorrow, continued Lin Feng and was unceasingly moving through the war drums. At this point, he had already destroyed 4 war drums, making them beat. He hadn't even used much of the breath he had taken. He was unceasingly moving. His voice was getting louder and was filled with emotion. The humiliation of Duanren. When the officials hate, they destroy. On the back of the armored horses, going to the mountains armed with flowers. Boom! The fifth war drum was smashed and disappeared as dust in the atmosphere. At that moment, the sword energy around Lin Feng's body seemed as vast the sky, the earth and the clouds. It was in perfect harmony with his song, as if it could annihilate an entire country. At the same time, an insane amount of sword force filled the air. It seemed like it was impossible to stop that force from increasing. It was surrounding the entire crowd. With magnificent ideals in my mind yet starvation filling my stomach, I eat their flesh. To settle my thirst, I drink their blood. Lin Feng's hand seemed to transform into a sword. It was followed by an incredible amount of force. He easily destroyed the sixth war drum. People's hearts were pounding. He had already destroyed 6 war drums. Clearing from the beginning until the end, the mountains and lakes, moving towards the heavens. The lyrics of his song were extremely presumptuous and seemed to be challenging the heavens. Around the body of that arrogant young man was an endless burning brilliance which was emerging into the atmosphere. His fist, which looked more like a sword, moved through the air and its incredible white glow crashed onto the 7th war drum which was smashed into pieces again and disappeared without leaving trace. That young man looked incredibly natural and unrestrained. At that moment Lin Feng finally stopped moving. His clothes and long hair were fluttering in the air. He looked frivolous, natural and unrestrained. His beautiful song was resonating in people's minds over and over. In a towering rage, I rest under the whistling sound of rain. Gazing into the distance, looking up to the heavens, I utter a long and loud cry. My chest feels painful. 30 soldiers now with the dust and earth, the moon and the clouds stretching as far as can see. The young man's hair turned white, he is filled with sorrow. The humiliation of Duanren. When the officials hate, they destroy. On the back of the armored horses, going to the mountains armed with flowers. With magnificent ideals in my mind yet starvation filling my stomach, I eat their flesh. To settle my thirst, I drink their blood. Clearing from the beginning until the end, the mountains and lakes, moving towards the heavens. With such inspiring and exciting lyrics, Lin Feng had risen to the heavens. He was heroic. In comparison, the song that Yu Tianchen had sung a moment before was, indeed, nothing compared to this. Compared with Lin Feng, he actually seemed like a nobody. Everybody looked calm and solemn but their passion had been ignited. All right, said Duan Wuya while standing up. His expression looked sharp. Such a singing talent was rare, especially coming from a teenager. In comparison with Lin Feng, Yu Tianchen had no artistic talent at all. At that moment, he just had the feeling that he was a buffoon trying to amuse Princess Duan Xinyi. Lin Feng had the spirit and composure of a hero. Duan Xinyi's beautiful eyes were twinkling. Her facial expression was resplendent. Surprisingly, Lin Feng could sing in such a marvelous way. Everybody, no matter if they were from the holy courtyard of Shuiyu or the Celestial Academy, remained silent and was looking at that unconventional young man. The images of Lin Feng's singing was replaying in their minds. At that moment, only Yu Tianchen had a hideous facial expression on his face. He had lost, that was a crushing defeat. He had lost in both the artistic and strength, it was really a crushing defeat. No need to talk about their artistic talent but as far as their strength was concerned, they had both made 7 drums beat and had both used only 1 breath. Besides, Lin Feng had sung longer and in a louder voice. Lin Feng had made the hearts of the crowd start to pound in their chests. The difficulty of Lin Feng's song was also higher. Besides, Lin Feng had not just broken the war drums but he had disintegrated them into powder. He had used powerful sword energy to turn them into dust. From the 1st to the 7th war drum, they had all been disintegrated without leaving trace. Therefore, it was clear at first glance who had won and who had lost. A short time before, Yu Tianchen thought he was above everyone else and at that moment, he was suffering a crushing defeat. The fact that he had been humiliating Lin Feng remained fresh in everybody's mind, but Lin Feng had also caused him to lose face. What Yu Tianchen couldn't stand at that moment is that Princess Duan Xinyi was staring at Lin Feng with her beautiful eyes. There was a splendor and radiance in her expression which didn't exist when she looked at other people. Duan Xinyi had also been enchanted by Lin Feng. Yu Tianchen couldn't allow such a thing to happen. Duan Xinyi was supposed to become his wife. That beautiful woman also possessed the power of a blood spirit. Yu Tianchen was determined to win. In the entire Shuiyu country, he had to be the one to win the princess' heart. Even though he hadn't won that battle, it didn't mean that he was weaker than Lin Feng. If used all his strength, Yu Tianchen was convinced that he was much stronger than Lin Feng. At that moment, Lin Feng finally moved. He slowly turned around and looked at Yu Tianchen. There was a densely sharp expression in Lin Feng's eyes. No matter if it is acquired on the path of cultivation, from being born into a noble family or because of one's natural talent, only those who have a high social status can marry a princess. This is despicable. Not knowing the vastness of the heavens because you overrate your strength. You think that you can marry the princess, that is truly the funniest thing in the world, said Lin Feng. Lin Feng paused and then continued in a cold tone, you criticize me for my social status. I admit that I don't have a higher social status than you, but you also say that I am weak and a nobody. I would like to ask you a question, apart from being born into a noble family, what else do you have? You do not know how large the world is, you are truly ignorant. Lin Feng's words were sharp and poignant, which made an ice-cold expression appear on Yu Tianchen's face. A family's social standing depends on your luck, you cannot change it. Cultivation is something you can change and create yourself. You can decide to become stronger and to improve your abilities, even if you don't have a high social status. If you decide to always surpass your own abilities, you can reach the clouds. I am sure that such people are not affected by their low social status anymore. Once they have reached the clouds, they despise those who, in the past, used to arrogantly look down on them. Only those who are that strong have the power to be arrogant. Lin Feng continued speaking, however, you are part of the other category, relying on your family's social standing. Besides, because you have a high social status, you think that you are true perfection. You are not brave and consider everyone else beneath you. You are only suited to being a big fish in a little pond. If you cannot break free from that way of thinking, then the best you can do is rely on the social standing granted to you by your clan. You are doomed. People will definitely surpass you. A clan with such people is doomed to decline and disappear sooner or later. When the people in the crowd heard Lin Feng's words, their hearts were racing. Those who didn't have a high social status had to be ambitious and brave. That's right, if they were determined to reach the clouds, sooner or later, they could. They would manage to surpass those who possessed everything in the continent. In the end, they would end up despising those who, in the past, despised them. Concerning the noble cultivators, they were dumbstruck after hearing what Lin Feng said. They didn't like to hear what Lin Feng was saying, but they had to admit that he was right. His analysis was extremely deep and precise, besides, it was justified. Indeed, if they didn't bravely move forward, even if they had an illustrious status in a noble clan, sooner or later, their clan, with such useless people, would disappear. The crowd was amazed by Lin Feng's words. He was so young and could understand things so well. He was way too mysterious. That boy, even though he doesn't have a high social status, will have unlimited opportunities in the future, said Duan Wuya, who was starting to think that Lin Feng would actually really be a good match for his sister, Duan Xinyi. While the whole crowd was thinking about what Lin Feng had just said, Yu Tianchen's facial expression had reached the ultimate degree of ugliness. Even if everything that Lin Feng had said was justified and true, he had been saying all these things on an arrogant tone in front of everyone else, humiliated a member of the Yu clan. At that moment the crowd was looking towards Lin Feng and Yu Tianchen. A cold chi-filled atmosphere and the situation felt tense. At that moment the crowd was looking towards Lin Feng and Yu Tianchen. A cold chi-filled atmosphere and the situation felt tense. Duan Wuya looked perplexed. He immediately stood up and said, "Okay. That's enough. Stop beating the drums. We should start heading off now. Lin Feng, you are in charge of the protection of the princess." When the crowd heard Duan Wuya, they were astonished. In the end, Duan Wuya had chosen Lin Feng. In his eyes, Lin Feng was more important than a young prodigy of the Yu clan. The crowd couldn't believe their eyes. After all, they had not seen what happened in the lovesick forest. In other people's eyes, Lin Feng was just Lin Feng. Even though he was outstanding, it was impossible for him to compete with a young prodigy from a noble clan. The crowd had the impression that Duan Wuya had given him the opportunity, even though it was undeserved simply because he liked Lin Feng. Lin Feng was also astonished. Actually, if Yu Tianchen hadn't made him angry and attempted to humiliate him, Lin Feng wouldn't have necessarily stood up. Even though the princess gave him a good impression, he still didn't have any feelings for her. It was because of her delicate facial features and general beauty, no man could find her disgusting. "Uncle Duan, even though I assigned Lin Feng to protect the princess, the others can also participate," said Duan Wuya to Duan Tianlang. He then immediately continued, "From now on, from all the members of the army, only the princess can give orders to Lin Feng. Lin Feng is also the person in charge of the princess' security. He can choose to achieve other military merits under his own decision. Besides, the whole army must help and assist Lin Feng if he requires it." When Duan Wuya finished talking, the crowd was astonished. Duan Wuya was giving incredible privileges to Lin Feng. "Duan Wuya is protecting me," thought Lin Feng. He immediately understood what Duan Wuya meant. Considering that Lin Feng's enemies were everywhere, Duan Wuya was worried that they would attempt to harm him. Therefore, he was giving a status to Lin Feng by making him the personal guard of the princess. Besides, he was reminding everybody else that attacking Lin Feng was the same as endangering the princess. "Lin Feng, did you hear me?" said Duan Wuya while looking at Lin Feng in a cold and indifferent tone. This time, there was no warmth or friendliness in his voice. There was only the might and power which made him sound like an emperor. "Roger," said Lin Feng while slightly nodding. Lin Feng obviously couldn't refuse protecting the princess. "All right, the princess' security is in your hands," said Duan Wuya while looking at Lin Feng with a profound look. He immediately looked towards Duan Tianlang and said, "Uncle, the troops are now under your control. When you arrive in Duanren City, please cooperate with General Lu Zhanglan to fight against the enemy. I will be waiting in the Imperial City for you to return triumphant. See you then." "Your Highness, I will spare no effort to defeat Mou and prevent Duanren City from being humiliated," replied Duan Tianlang in a calm and solemn tone. Duan Wuya slightly nodded, glanced at Duan Xianyi, then turned around and left without a shred of hesitation. Duan Tianlang went back to his seat, his pitch-black armor looked majestic. He glanced at the crowd and said, "Troops, back to your initial positions." The bronze-armored soldiers quickly moved the war drums away. The people of the holy courtyard of Shuiyu and of the Celestial Academy stood up. Among the troops, obedience to the chief commander was absolute. Yu Tianchen coldly glanced at Lin Feng with killing intent filling his eyes. Immediately after, he turned around and moved back to his seat. When Lin Feng noticed Yu Tianchen's hostile behavior, he secretly smiled coldly and said, "I hope that you will not continue to provoke me." Then, Lin Feng turned around and walked towards the members of the Celestial Academy. "Lin Feng." At that moment, Duan Tianlang shouted and called out to Lin Feng, which surprised him. He then turned his head around. "You're going to the wrong place," said Duan Tianlang indifferently and then added, "Now, you are the personal guard of the princess, you should always be at her side with the troops. How negligent are you? If anything happens to the princess, you will be held responsible." Lin Feng narrowed his eyes. Now that Duan Wuya had left, Duan Tianlang was starting to put pressure on Lin Feng. However, Lin Feng couldn't refute Duan Tianlang's argument. I made a mistake, said Lin Feng while smiling indifferently, and then adjusted his trajectory to walk towards the princess. Duan Tianlang was the chief commander of the army and was able to put pressure on Lin Feng. Lin Feng had to be careful not to give Duan Tianlang any reason to do so. Sorry for bringing you trouble, said Duan Xine when she saw that Lin Feng was walking towards her. She had a warm and tender smile on her face. She was extremely beautiful. It is an honor to be in charge of the princess' safety, said Lin Feng politely while smiling. Duan Xine looked at Lin Feng and blinked twice. She then snorted with laughter while saying, Lin Feng, how come I have the feeling that you had to force that? It doesn't seem like you. When Lin Feng saw her magnificent smile, he was stupefied. He immediately shrugged and smiled. He looked like he felt at ease. What a pervert, said a voice from behind Lin Feng. He had the sensation that someone was staring at him. He turned around and saw Lu Fei, who was glaring at him with evil eyes, which surprised him. That girl, was she jealous? Lin Feng then looked at Meng Qing. She looked cold and detached like always. She wasn't looking at Lin Feng. How could this girl be so cold? When Duan Tianlang saw that everybody had gone back to their initial positions, he glanced at the crowd and said in a very loud voice, Troops, let's head to battle. Let's go, shouted the several thousand troops. Immediately after, the ground was shaking from so many people moving towards Duanren city. A few days later, a huge dust cloud covered the horizon. Thousands of troops were riding their horses on an ancient road. From above, their formation looked like a dragon's tail. There was a huge cloud of dust trailing behind them. At the very front were two horses ridden by Lin Feng and Princess Duan Xine. It had been her decision to ride a horse at the front with everybody else instead of sitting inside a carriage. She had given up her usual comfort and joined the soldiers. Of course, in the world of cultivation, there were very few people who were pampered and spoiled even when it came to women. Cultivators could ride a horse over huge distances, for many days without rest, and it was considered normal. They would only be slightly tired, nothing more. The evening sun was on the horizon in the west. The sunlight coupled with the rosy clouds offered a splendid view. In the distance, there was an old and simple city. Above the city the evening sun was slowly setting. It was quiet and tranquil. A small breeze was blowing through it which gave it a desolate impression. Duanren City. The troops finally arrived in Duanren City, but the gate was firmly closed. The people in the city looked cold and remained motionless. Chief Commander Duan Tianlang has arrived, hurry and open the city gate, shouted some troops towards the people on the gate while raising their banner. The people at the gate looked cold and indifferent. They glanced at the troops and one of them said, except for when the general gives us the order, we will not open the gate. What? The troops were stupefied when they heard them. They wouldn't open the gate? A soldier furiously shouted, we are the Imperial City troops. Here with the chief commander Duan Tianlang. The emperor has given us the order to come. I order you to open the gate and let us in. Only the general can give us an order, said the person as coldly as before. They didn't listen to anyone's orders apart from those given by their general. Duanren City was under the control of General Lu Tsonglan. Apart from him, nobody else could give orders to his troops. Lu Tsonglan, how audacious. It seems like he is not attaching importance to the Imperial City troops, said Duan Tianlang coldly before adding, does he think that he has the highest social status in the country or what? When the crowd heard what Duan Tianlang was saying about Lu Tsonglan, they started whispering all sorts of comments, and at that moment Lin Feng smiled coldly and said, what Duan Tianlang is saying is impossible. He perfectly knows how strong we are, but the fact that his people are not opening the gate until he gives them the order proves that he knows what he is doing. He taught them perfect military discipline. Besides, why do you say that he thinks his social status is higher than anyone in the country? When Duan Tianlang heard Lin Feng, he was stupefied. He coldly looked at Lin Feng and said, What do you think gives you the right to intervene in my conversation? What do you intend to do? You, Duan Tianlang, are wrong. At the moment, I am the princess' personal guard. I will spare no effort to fulfill my duty. What you just said could have very serious consequences to the extent that it could trigger a mutiny. If something happened to the princess during such a mutiny, you would have to bear responsibility. Lin Feng was fixedly staring at Duan Tianlang, sounding neither lofty nor humble. "Shut your mouth," shouted Duan Tianlang and then said coldly, "You have the gift when it comes to speech and enjoy babbling nonsense. Don't think that because you are the princess' personal guard you can act however you wish. The military has rules." "Shut your mouth," shouted Duan Tianlang and then said coldly, "You have the gift when it comes to speech and enjoy babbling nonsense. Don't think that because you are the princess' personal guard you can act however you wish. The military has rules. Why don't you shut your mouth? I, Lin Feng, have come to Duanren City to help. I never said that I wanted to give orders to the troops. I am doing exactly what the second prince has asked me to do. I will stay next to the princess and protect her. What gives you the right to give me orders? I am not your subordinate." Lin Feng shouted with the same tone as Duan Tianlang. He had a cold smile on his face. They had already arrived in Duanren City. Why did he need to fear Duan Tianlang? When Duan Tianlang heard Lin Feng, he narrowed his eyes. He looked cold and murderous. In Duan Tianlang's eyes, Lin Feng was part of his army. Even if he was the princess' personal guard, Duan Tianlang still thought that he could play with Lin Feng as he wished. He hadn't thought that Lin Feng was going to contradict him in front of all the troops. What an insanely audacious guy. At that moment, the crowd was also dumbstruck. They were blankly staring at Lin Feng. That guy was really insane. He surprisingly dared contradict his superior, the chief commander. Uncle Duan Tianlang, what Lin Feng said is true. When the people of Duanren City see a military force that overwhelms them with numbers of unknown origin, they must adhere strictly to what they have been told and not open the gate. That is precisely why General Lu Tsanglan has ordered them not to act without his orders, and his methods are correct. What you are saying is inappropriate, said Duan Xinyi, surprisingly defending Lin Feng. Everybody was astonished. Under his helmet, Duan Tianlang's eyes revealed a cold expression. He then said indifferently, "Princess, Your Highness, before discussing whether what I say is appropriate or not, considering the outrageous words Lin Feng has said, I first want to punish him." "Punish me? You want to punish me?" said Lin Feng while smiling coldly. At that moment, Lin Feng already understood that Duan Tianlang and the second prince were not on the same wavelength at all. If anyone wanted to attack Lin Feng, they wouldn't act because of Duan Wuya. He had said in front of the entire army that the princess was Lin Feng's only superior. Not obeying military orders can classify as treason and insubordination, which is an act that must be punished, said Duan Tianlang. Treason and insubordination? Lin Feng was staring at Duan Tianlang. What do you intend to do to me? I don't want to make the princess lose face, so I will not kill you. However, I will make your life a sheer hell and confine you to a prison. Then, I will talk with His Majesty and your destiny will be in his hands. Ridiculous, said Lin Feng with an indifferent attitude. Immediately after, he looked at Duan Xinyi and said, "Princess, it is not that I don't want to protect you, it is just that Duan Tianlang doesn't want to let me do it properly. I am leaving." Lin Feng urged his dragon colt horse away using the spurs while saying, "Anyone who wants to come with me is free to do so." "I am curious to see who will dare to go with you," said Duan Tianlang with a cold smile on his face. That guy was extremely audacious. Did he really want to die? But when Duan Tianlang finished his sentence, a great deal of people started moving towards Lin Feng, Meng Qing, Lu Fei, Wen Ao Shui, Yuan Shan, Duan Feng, etc. There was even He Mo, followed by 32 men wearing bronze masks. A huge group of people had come out to follow Lin Feng. Duan Tianlang was astonished. He was wondering, since when did Lin Feng have so many companions? Princess, it's not that I am not willing to protect you, but Duan Tianlang is trying to avenge his wrongs using his current title and doesn't allow me to protect you. Please take good care of yourself. Immediately after, Lin Feng left and galloped towards the city gate at full speed. Everybody else was blankly staring at Lin Feng. The others were closely following him, which made the people in the crowd completely shocked. Kill them, shouted Duan Tianlang coldly. Danger was imminent. Someone behind him took out an arrow and put it in his bow. Lin Feng was stupefied. Cold energy was released from his body, but as before, he continued galloping forwards. He was ready to fight, but still continued towards the city gate. Stop! A furious shout filled the air. That voice belonged to the soft and tender Duan Xinyi. Princess, Your Highness, they are soldiers. If they disobey their orders, they must die, said Duan Tianlang coldly while staring at Duan Xinyi. A general in the field is not bound by the orders from his sovereign. That was particularly true in the case of Duan Tianlang. Once he left the imperial city, Duan Tianlang was already ignoring Duan Wuya's orders and wanted to kill Lin Feng and his friends. How bold, thought the crowd. Yu Tianchen and the others were smiling. What they didn't dare to do, Duan Tianlang was going to do it for them. Orders, said Duan Xinyi looking cold. She wouldn't have thought that Duan Tianlang could be that audacious. Today, whoever fires an arrow, I will kill you on the spot. We will see if Duan Tianlang or anyone else will dare to stop me, shouted Princess Duan Xinyi coldly. Everyone was astonished and felt extremely awkward. Indeed, if Duan Xinyi wanted to try and kill them, even if they wanted to fight back, they wouldn't. If they injured the princess, they were convinced that Duan Tianlang wouldn't hesitate to kill them. Duan Xinyi and Lin Feng were not the same. She was the princess and her social status was extremely high. Duan Tianlang may have been very audacious, but he would never dare cause harm to the princess. Duan Tianlang was stupefied. He wouldn't have thought that the princess would help Lin Feng to such a degree. In a short time, Lin Feng and his friends were already far away from the army and were very close to the entrance into Duanren city. At that moment, even if an arrow touched them, it would not cause them much damage. I am Lin Feng. Brothers, could you please open the gate? Sorry for the inconvenience. Lin Feng shouted these words to the soldiers at the top of the gate. These people could clearly see Lin Feng's face, and they smiled at him and said, "It's young master Lin Feng, open the gate." Lin Feng, young master, is Xiao okay? Said the soldiers on the top of the gate. At that moment, Lu Fei took off her helmet and her beautiful face appeared. Xiao, you came back, said a soldier, looking excited. At that moment, a rumbling noise spread through the air. Lin Feng and the others urged their horses forwards and entered the city. This scene made the soldiers on the horizon look at each other in dismay. They didn't understand. They had come because of orders from the imperial clan, even Duan Tianlang had joined them, but the city still would not open the gates for them. They are really audacious, General. Should we attempt to take the gate, suggested someone behind Duan Tianlang. Amongst them were many strong cultivators of the Ling Qi layer. The gate wasn't that high, so it was easy for them to jump onto it. Destroying the gate would have looked like the city was being besieged. If given the order, they would fight to death against Duan Tianlang's enemies. Duan Tianlang turned around and looked at the person with a sharp gaze. I came here to cooperate with Lu Zhanglan and defeat our common enemy. Do you want me to provoke them and cause trouble? Get the hell away from me. Indeed, General, said that person when they heard Duan Tianlang's furious shout. They then moved away. The troops were furious and agitated. How disgusting. They had come to help Lu Zhanglan fight the enemy, but they were blocked at the gate of the city. The good opinion they had of Lu Zhanglan vanished. They didn't understand why Duan Tianlang was accepting such a humiliation. At that moment, Lin Feng and the others were in Duanren City and noticed that the city was calm and in perfect order. There wasn't the slightest bit of chaos. At the same time, Lu Zonglan appeared. He was taking a stroll through the city. Lin Feng, Fei Fei, you're here. Uncle Lu, shouted Lin Feng, but he was only surprised and bewildered. He was staring at the distance. Lin Feng, are you wondering why Duanren City is so peaceful and why I don't let them come into the city? Said Lu Zonglan as if he could read Lin Feng's thoughts. Please enlighten me with your explanations, said Lin Feng without admitting it. Lu Zonglan smiled wryly and said, Lin Feng, I will definitely let you know my reasoning. You came to help us fight against Mou country because they were invading us and we urgently needed help, right? Could it be that is not the case? Lin Feng, when he heard Lu Zonglan's words, narrowed his eyes as if he was realizing something. Lu Zonglan was smiling wryly and had a piercingly cold expression within his smile. Duanren City is very calm. It isn't in danger at all. They haven't come to help us, but rather to seize the power. The Imperial City can't stand it anymore and has decided to attack me. Lin Feng was dumbstruck. A short moment after, he took a deep breath. Lin Feng was dumbstruck. A short moment after, he took a deep breath. Oh, my God, whispered Lin Feng. He thought that he had truly been tricked. He had really believed that Duanren City was in a critical situation. The imperial family was really hard to understand sometimes. They were living in two different worlds. For power and influence, there was nothing they wouldn't dare to do. They wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice other people. Are you going to let them wait outside this entire time? Asked Lin Feng. Lu Zonglan smiled coldly and said, since I already knew their plans, invading my city without fighting is impossible. I want to see how they intend to seize my city as long as it's under my control. But Lin Feng, you shouldn't have come here with Fei Fei, it's a bad situation, said Lu Zonglan with a wry smile on his face. In the past, he had asked Lin Feng to take Lu Fei with him because he didn't want them to get caught in such a situation. He hadn't thought that they would come back at the worst possible time. Since you're already here, you cannot escape now. Lin Feng shrugged without paying attention and just smiled. All right, let's go to the mansion, said Lu Zonglan said while shaking his head and smiling wryly. He was astonished by the crowd following Lin Feng. Each and every single one of them looked like a deity and released a fine qi. They were all very strong, especially the girl wearing a fine veil. She was releasing a pure qi. Lu Zonglan found her very mysterious. Fei Fei, was Lin Feng good to you? Asked Lu Zonglan on the tone of a joke while looking at Lu Fei. Father, said Lu Fei while looking at her father. She then immediately looked at Lin Feng and said, Lin Feng chose to be the princess' personal guard. It is a very big problem. Arg. Lin Feng was stunned. That girl was really vicious. The princess' personal guard, whispered Lu Zonglan astonished. Father, you also don't know that Lin Feng in the Imperial City, Lin Feng befriended the second prince and that the princess thinks highly of him. The second prince even asked Lin Feng to take care of the princess. When Lin Feng heard Lu Fei's vivid explanations, he couldn't help but had the feeling that he had done something bad and offended his father-in-law. Lin Feng, said Lu Zonglan when he heard that Lu Fei was jealous. That guy was quite impressive. Lu Fei was already jealous of others. Uncle Lu, actually, I think that Lu Fei is more beautiful than the princess, said Lin Feng shamelessly and continued, but it's just that Lu Fei continues to refuse when I ask for her to sleep with me. Hee hee. Lin Feng was forcing a smile while talking. Everybody around him was dumbstruck and looking at him with their eyes wide open in shock. At that moment, Lu Zonglan was astonished. Besides, Lu Fei knitted her brows and looked at Lin Feng in a furious way. She then said, You perverted bastard. Have I ever acted perverted, Fei Fei? You cannot lie in the presence of Uncle Lu. If I have ever been perverted with you, tell Uncle Lu about it, said Lin Feng in a decent way. Lu Fei almost fainted. That guy was really shameless. Lu Zhonglan was speechless as well. Immediately after, he burst into laughter so hard that tears ran down his face. He then fixedly stared at Lin Feng. It seemed like Lin Feng could make use of any situation. Everybody else was astonished and looking at Lin Feng. How frivolous, unconventional, unrestrained and stubborn. He never reacted the way that people expected, and his teasing Lu Fei was very comical. His personality at that moment and when he was fighting was completely different, as if he was a different person. The group all continued until they entered Lu Zhonglan's private mansion. Lu Zhonglan gave them a comfortable place to stay. However, Lu Zhonglan continued to leave Duan Tianlang and the others outside of the city and ignored them. Duan Tianlang didn't cause trouble either. He calmly stayed with his troops outside of the city. 3 days later, Lu Zhonglan, Lin Feng and the others were having a meal when some shocking news arrived. A sentinel came to inform them that the Prince of Mou, Jia, was 500 kilometers away from Duanren border with his army. Considering their speed, the troops would only need 2 days to arrive in Duanren border. Lin Feng was surprised and looked at Lu Zhonglan. Lu Zhonglan's nickname was the Divine Arrow, and his troops considered him as a deity and knew he was incredibly strong. However, when he heard that news, he lost his calm and stood up. The news was obviously very shocking. Lu Zhonglan was stupefied and looking at Lin Feng and the others. He then slowly sat back down and said, "Mo Jia, the Prince of Mou is 17 years old. He is a true genius. He is so young and has already broken through to the 9th Ling Qi layer. Will soon break through to the Xian Qi layer. Besides, he is equally as intelligent. It is said that when he gets involved in a war, he is invincible." Lin Feng and the others were stupefied. 17 years old and had the strength of the 9th Ling Qi layer, that was indeed terrifying. He was much stronger than some of the high officials of Xueyu. Besides, that 17-year-old young man had never lost on the battlefield. "Father, you have never lost either, and you participated in many battles," said Lu Fei. The crowd was silently nodding. Lu Zhonglan, the Divine Arrow, was famous. He had been accumulating victories over a great number of years. "I am not worried about that. Apart from his strength, he is also very important within the Mou country. If he gets involved in the fight, the country will use all their strength." The first reason is that they want to ensure his security, and the second reason is prestige. Mo Jia is the symbol of the strength for their country. Therefore, that fight will be horrible for us. Lu Zhonglan's face firmly wrinkled. There were troubles inside and outside of their country. Inside of the Xueyu country, the emperor didn't trust him and meant him harm, while outside, the Mou country wanted to invade them and had deployed all their forces. There was a huge crisis in Xueyu. At that moment, Lu Zhonglan stood up and said, "You can continue to eat. I'm going to the city gate to have a look." Lin Feng was stupefied. He understood what Lu Zhonglan was saying. He wanted to let Duan Tianlang enter the city and go fight the enemy together. No wonder he has such a high reputation. He is extremely wise as well as strong, thought the crowd. He knew that Duan Tianlang had come to seize his city, but he would let him enter to fight against Mo Jia on his side. That was a very difficult decision to make for an ordinary person. "The Prince of Mou, Mo Jia," whispered Lin Feng. It seemed that this time, the Mou country was turning out in force and was ready to attack. It seemed like a great calamity. Lin Feng hadn't thought that he would go through such things. "I'm coming too," said Lin Feng at that moment while standing up and then walking towards Lu Zhonglan. Everybody was stupefied and suddenly followed Lin Feng. At that moment, in the middle of the city, it was still very peaceful and calm. Since Lu Zhonglan was in the city, nothing ever happened there. However, the calm in the city felt like the calm before a storm. The smell of war was moving closer. Outside of Duanren, only hills and valleys could be seen over the boundless distance. Outside of Duanren, only hills and valleys could be seen over the boundless distance. That area was covered with dust blowing in the wind. In that remote area, white tents were erected everywhere which looked like a small city. The troops stationed there all belonged to the Xueyu country. Duanren border was the only way to reach Duanren city. Besides, Duan-Tian border was just a huge valley. From Duanren city, there was a panoramic view of the valley, so if enemies came, they could easily spot them with a glance. Therefore, Lu Zhonglan couldn't let the troops of Mou enter Duanren border that easily. He had troops guarding the outer border. Except for critical situations, his troops normally wouldn't go to Duanren border. At that moment, Lin Feng and Lu Zhonglan were together above the city gate of Duanren city. They were looking at Duan Tianlang and his troops. They had passed through Duanren city and were heading towards the border. Lu Zhonglan had eventually allowed Duan Tianlang to come into Duanren city, but there was only one condition: he and his troops were not allowed to stay in Duanren city. They had to leave immediately and go to Duanren border and establish their military camp. They had to stay there and defend in case of attack. Duan Tianlang had accepted those conditions. Once inside Duanren city, he had surprisingly continued and moved towards Duanren border. Lin Feng, let's go to the campsite, said Lu Zhonglan indifferently when he saw that the troops were moving to the Duanren border. Lin Feng slightly nodded and they immediately went down the stairs and headed towards the Duanren border. In Duanren border, there were countless old broken weapons on the ground. While walking through the valley, the wind was howling. Immediately after, coldness invaded Lin Feng's body, started in the legs and then spreading to the rest of his body. Lin Feng's heart started beating a bit faster. There were so many weapons covering the ground in Duanren border. They had all been broken during the war and their owners had all died on the battlefield. Those days, Duanren border was a sea of broken weapons which diffused a cold energy like mist across the ground. Lin Feng inhaled a deep breath. He looked calm and solemn, but his heart was trembling. It was impossible for anyone to look at such a scene and not be touched. They walked to the other side of Duanren border where there was a precipice. Lin Feng gazed into the distance and thought that the cliffs were incredibly beautiful, but he was still aware that danger lurked there. Lu Zhonglan could easily take advantage of the landscape. Even though there was no imminent danger at the moment, as before, Lin Feng felt an oppressive cold qi while walking in the valley. Only after having entirely passed through it could Lin Feng relax. There were tents as far as Lin Feng's eyes could see. At that moment, he took a very deep breath and said, "Uncle Lu, how many troops are there here?" 300,000, replied Lu Zhonglan indifferently. In the continent of the Nine Clouds, amongst cultivators, there weren't many who were willing to join the army. Otherwise, 300,000 stationed troops was a trivial number considering that the Xueyu country had billions of people. The Mou country was entirely unified under their emperor. There wasn't any sects which had influence. In their country, they always say a single army is stronger. Amongst the 9 other countries of Xueyu, their army was considered as one of the strongest. They had over 3 million troops. They always had ambitions to conquer the other countries. Xueyu and Mou were neighbors, so Mou wanted to take the initiative to invade. The Sentinels have reported that this time, the Mou army has over 500,000 troops, said Lu Zhonglan indifferently. Lin Feng was astonished. That meant 200,000 more than them. That was a terrifying amount. Duan Tianlang also brought 100,000 troops. If he wholeheartedly cooperates with me, the Mou country is far from being able to invade us. Our geographical position is very advantageous. The opponents may have 500,000 troops, but if Duan Tianlang and I manage to efficiently cooperate, then the terrain advantage will make it too difficult for them to invade, said Lu Zhonglan. There wasn't much hope, but Lu Zhonglan had high expectations. The soldiers on the Qixia armored horses were rigorously protecting the campsite. The best soldiers were there. Lu Zhonglan and Lin Feng arrived on the campsite and said, make Han Man and Pajun come to my tent." "Roger, General," said an officer. A short time after, two silhouettes entered the tent. The one leading them was a robust young man. His face was well proportioned according to his body. He looked determined and strict. These two people were both wearing red armor. Only their eyes, which contained a golden light, were visible. The two people moved into the tent. They were about to salute Lu Zhonglan, but when they saw Lin Feng, they were dumbstruck. Immediately after, inside his armor, a wholehearted smile appeared on the face of the robust man. "Lin Feng, big brother." Han Man rushed over to tightly hugged Lin Feng. Behind him, Pajun was also smiling warmly. No sharp chi was being released from his body, but he was as full of vitality. "Lin Feng, you guys can chat, I am going to see Duan Tianlang as he settles down," said Lu Zhonglan with a warm and soft smile on his face. Immediately after, he left the tent, leaving Lin Feng and his friends alone. "Han Man, Pajun, are you getting used to this place?" asked Lin Feng. "We are used to it. Lin Feng, big brother, Pajun and I are now controlling elite troops. The general has put them under our control. They are all very strong and all have an outstanding background." Han Man's voice was filled with pride. He hadn't been there for a very long time and already had 1,000 troops under his control. To achieve this, he had only relied on his own efforts. Lu Zhonglan wasn't the type of person who gave privileges to people because he was friendly with them, but he knew how to recognize people's natural talents. "Have you been in many dangerous situations?" Lin Feng didn't really care about what his two friends had accomplished, he was more concerned with their safety. "We haven't been in many dangerous situations. Pajun and I have broken through to the 4th Ling Chi layer," said Han Man while smiling proudly, making Pajun smile wryly. "Lin Feng, brother, Han Man has become a monster. There were some enemies waiting in an ambush outside of the country. In the end, he ended up fighting against 2 strong cultivators of the 5th Ling Chi layer and slaughtered them as well as all the rest of their members. His spirit has awakened and it provides him with endless strength. However, when he killed them, his body was completely wrecked by the time the battle was over. Alone, he killed 2 cultivators of the 5th Ling Chi layer as well as all the other people." Lin Feng's pupils shrank. He was pleasantly surprised. Besides, Han Man had just broken through to the 5th Ling Chi layer. Han Man scratched his head with a shy smile on his face. He then said, "I don't know what happened either. Since my spirit awakened, it seems like I am able to fuse with the earth and absorb its strength to make it my own. With this power, killing these 2 cultivators of the 5th Ling Chi layer wasn't too difficult." Could it be a blood spirit, thought Lin Feng. When Han Man was at the prisoner arena, his spirit had awakened once already when he broke through to the Ling Chi layer. It was obviously different than a normal spirit as it had awakened a second time. "Lin Feng, Pajun speaks highly of me, but he's also been hiding things from us. He is also able to defeat cultivators of the 5th Ling Chi layer," said Han Man, which made Lin Feng stupefied. "Pajun was also able to defeat cultivators of the 5th Ling Chi layer? Be honest and explain these things to Lin Feng yourself," said Han Man while glancing at Pajun. Pajun shook his head while smiling and immediately walked towards Lin Feng. "Lin Feng, big brother, take a look." While speaking, Pajun stretched his hand and a vine slowly emerged. It looked like an illusion but was real. When it reached Lin Feng's body, Lin Feng could feel that it was solid. That was Pajun's vine spirit, which he could use to attack people by surprise. But at that moment, a sharp energy suddenly emerged from Pajun's body. His pupils suddenly became dark and looked piercingly sharp. A black illusion suddenly slowly emerged from his back. In the middle of that illusion, a long black spear was floating and was pointing towards the vault of heaven. Dual spirit. Lin Feng's pupils shrank. That was another spirit. Pajun had a dual spirit. The vine spirit and the illusionary spear vanished in the blink of an eye. Pajun was smiling indifferently. His dual spirit were his most powerful trump card. He even hid it from Han Man for a while. Haha, awesome, a dual spirit. Pajun, you and Han Man are the same, you are both geniuses. No wonder when I first met you, the expression in your eyes looked so sharp. Lin Feng was smiling wholeheartedly. His two good friends were amazingly strong, which made him very happy. Han Man's spirit had been awakened a second time, which probably meant he possessed a blood spirit, and Pajun surprisingly had a dual spirit, which was extremely rare. Having a dual spirit is no big deal, especially when you have a big slave mark on your face. It's as if I already died long ago in the prisoner arena, said Pajun while sighing. Lin Feng looked at Pajun and said, Pajun, don't worry about that mark on your face, sooner or later, I will help you remove it. Every drop of blood could go through a rebirth process on the path of cultivation. It was very easy to modify and alter the network of blood vessels, therefore, removing that slave mark would be as easy as turning one's hand over. That's right, don't get depressed. We will get rid of these marks, sooner or later, said Han Man while smiling, and continued, Lin Feng, let's go for a walk. I will tell you more about the other troops and the current situation. All right. Lin Feng nodded, and immediately after, the three friends left the tent. They walked towards the troops outside of the tent. Pajun said, Lin Feng, big brother, amongst the troops, there are different categories, the guards, the sergeants, the lieutenants, the non-commissioned officers and the officers. The guards have 10 soldiers under their control. The sergeants have 10 guards, and therefore indirectly 100 soldiers, under their control. The lieutenants, which Pajun and I are, have 10 sergeants under their control and indirectly control all of their soldiers, which is 1,000 in total. Even higher in the ranks, there are the non-commissioned officers who control 10 lieutenants and therefore 10,000 soldiers. Our troops are composed of a total of 300,000 soldiers. Excluding General Lu Tsonglan, there are 3 officers divided into a left, right and middle. Besides, each officer has 10 non-commissioned officers under their control. Besides, there are also the Qi Xia armored troops with special commanders. Pajun and I are part of that category. Lin Feng understood how the military ranks worked. The hierarchy was strict. It didn't differ much from the previous world. The lower ranked had to execute the orders given by the higher ranked. Han Man, how strong are these officers? Asked Lin Feng. He wanted to understand the potential of the army. The best way to find out was to understand how strong the officers were. Han Man, how strong are these officers? Asked Lin Feng. He wanted to understand the potential of the army. The best way to find out was to understand how strong the officers were. Ordinary soldiers are all at the Qi layer. Guards are at the peak of the Qi layer. Sergeants are required to have broken through to the Ling Qi layer. It's even stricter for the lieutenants, who are required to have broken through, at least, the 3rd Ling Qi layer. Non-commissioned officers must have broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer, and as far as the 3 officers are concerned, one is at the 8th Ling Qi layer and the 2 others are at the 9th Ling Qi layer. One more step and they'll reach the Xian Qi layer. They are extremely strong. Han Man explained these things in details to Lin Feng. Strength was the most important thing in the cultivation world, especially within the army. Strength was required when speaking to soldiers. It was impossible to rely only on one's military exploits. Strength was necessary to make subordinates obey orders. Even on the battlefield, without strength, it was too easy to get killed. Being inspiring and intimidating was the biggest challenge. Lin Feng, big brother, we stand alone as the Qi Xia troops. Even though the number is not as numerous as for the other parts of the army, their average strength is much higher than the other soldiers. Besides, the officer of the Qi Xia troops is at the peak of the 9th Ling Qi layer. It is said that he is about to break through to the Xian Qi layer. How majestic, added Han Man. Lin Feng understood why the situation was that way. The Qi Xia troops were elite troops created by Lu Tsonglan himself. It was impossible for them not to be the strongest unit within the army. The armor they were wearing was different from that of the other soldiers. They all had black and gold armor, which greatly increased their defense. Besides, the armor had a red luster to it which made the soldiers look incredibly majestic. That is why Han Man and Pajun wore the armor. It made them strike fear into people. One glance was enough to scare people away, as if the armor contained the swift and fierce chi of the Chi Xia. Lin Feng, big brother, you can ask the general to give you a lieutenant position so that we can fight the enemy together. Han Man's voice was filled with enthusiasm. Lin Feng had come to fight the enemy. If they could fight together side by side as brothers, they would certainly be even more inspired and motivated. Lin Feng. At that moment, 5 people were moving towards them. The one taking the lead was Lu Tsanglan. When Han Man and Pajun saw these people, they stood perfectly straight, slightly bowed and performed a military salute. General, officer. Lu Tsanglan slightly nodded and said, Han Man, Pajun, you two can leave. Roger, General, said Han Man and Pajun while looking at Lin Feng with a mysterious smile on their faces. Immediately after, they left. Lin Feng, come in, there with me, said Lu Tsanglan. Immediately after, he and the 4 people entered the tent. Lin Feng closely followed behind them. In the tent, Lu Tsanglan and the 4 others sat down in different places and stared at Lin Feng, who was standing. Lin Feng was also staring back at them. Lin Feng looked at the 2 people on Lu Tsanglan's sides. One was wearing a black and gold armor and the other one was wearing golden armor. The 2 others were wearing silver armor. Besides, these people's expressions all looked sharp and majestic. They were calmly sitting there, but Lin Feng had the impression that the Chi Xia troops' chi was filling the atmosphere. Lin Feng, this is the officer of the Chi Xia troops, Jiu Chi Xia. This is the middle officer, Ren Qing Quang. This is the left officer, Feng Yuhan, and this is the right officer, Lei Qing Tian. Lu Tsanglan introduced these people to Lin Feng. Jiu Chi Xia, the officer of the Chi Xia troops, was wearing the Chi Xia armor. Ren Qing Quang was wearing the golden armor. The left and the right officers, Feng Yuhan and Lei Qing Tian, were wearing silver armor. Lu Tsanglan had appointed these people to lead huge portions of the army, 300,000 troops in total. Their power and influence reached the heavens. Lin Feng slightly bowed in front of these people, but he was full of questions. He didn't know why Uncle Lu had introduced him to all these people. Lu Tsanglan had left for a walk and had come back with these 4 people. It was clearly intentional and was no coincidence at all. This is Lin Feng whom I was telling you about. The one who has conquered Fei Fei's heart, my future son-in-law, said Lu Tsanglan to the 4 officers while smiling. Lin Feng was dumbstruck. Lu Tsanglan was surprisingly officially declaring that Lu Fei and Lin Feng had an intimate relation and that he was going to become his son-in-law. Even though Lin Feng knew that Lu Tsanglan was trying to match Lu Fei and Lin Feng, however, they were just friends. There was nothing intimate between them. Lu Tsanglan's words made Lin Feng feel very surprised, but since he spoke that way, Lin Feng couldn't contradict him. He had no choice but to nod and confirm. I am curious to see what kind of man Lu Fei likes. The right officer Lei Qing Tian stood up and took a few steps towards Lin Feng, and suddenly, an incredible amount of qi moved straight towards Lin Feng. That qi smelt like blood and death. Lin Feng, at that moment, had the impression that the person in front of him wasn't a human being but a demonic killing machine. His hands were covered with an endless amount of blood belonging to his victims. How terrifying! Lin Feng remained motionless. That insane qi was able to affect people's determination. The terrifying qi was extremely oppressing. Lin Feng didn't dare imagine how many lives he had taken to become an officer. Such a qi was monstrous. Ha! Lei Qing Tian looked interested when he saw that Lin Feng was remaining calm. Immediately after, he took another step towards Lin Feng. He was now about 1 meter away from Lin Feng and his bloodthirsty eyes were staring at Lin Feng. He looked like a demon. Lin Feng's facial expression was still the same. He was calmly looking into these 2 eyes. With his determination, it was difficult for external things to affect or scare Lin Feng. Out of Lin Feng's body suddenly emerged a dense and thick battle energy. It wasn't as terrifying as the officer's chi, but it was piercingly cold and smelt like death. Even if it wasn't as strong as the powerful chi he was facing, it was still a brave move from Lin Feng. Boom! Lin Feng took a step forward. He surprisingly didn't move backward, but forward. After that step, only 2 steps were separating Lin Feng and Lei Qingtian. They both looked fierce and determined. The chi and the burning battle energy collided in the air. Lin Feng's long hair was fluttering from the wind created by the shockwaves. That entire scene was only about 10 seconds in length. Lei Qingtian's chi then slowly vanished. He had a smile on the corner of his mouth. Not bad. Not only didn't you move away from me, but you came closer. I like that, said Lei Qingtian while smiling wholeheartedly. He tapped Lin Feng's shoulders, which made his body shake. He was extremely strong. No wonder Fei Fei likes him. For someone of his age, having a strength which exceeds the 5th Ling Qi layer is really good, said the left officer Feng Yuhan while nodding and smiling. The atmosphere in the tent wasn't serious and solemn at all anymore. If I'm not mistaken, he has already broken through to the 6th Ling Qi layer, right? Said the middle officer Ren Qingquang while smiling. Lin Feng slightly nodded and said, Officer Ren, you are right. You are not even 18 yet. Having reached such a cultivation level is quite impressive. Those who help us here are much weaker. You have unlimited possibilities with your talent. Too bad that you are not going to stay for very long amongst the army. Ren Qingquang's voice was filled with regret. Talented young cultivators didn't stay within the army. All they were seeking was enlightenment on the path of cultivation. Even when they fought on the side of the army, it was just to gain practical experience and become stronger. Situations where life and death were at stake helped them to become stronger. That kind of cultivator would leave the army after having completed their training. People like Lu Zhonglan were rare. Because of his function as general, he had many burdens and obligations. He had amazing talent and was constantly getting stronger even with these burdens. Being a general wasn't ordinary cultivation training, he had to motivate the hearts of the officers and the troops. Lin Feng's natural talent was much more frightening than Lu Zhonglan's talent. He was obviously not going to stay within the army. From the 4 officers, only Jiu Qixia hadn't said a word. He looked solemn and respectful. His facial expression looked like it had been frozen for 1,000 years. All right, you can go back to your positions. Qixia, you can stay here, said Lu Zhong indifferently. The 3 officers nodded and left the tent. Lin Feng shouted, Jiu Qixia, who had been silent all this time. Ha! Lin Feng raised his head and looked Jiu Qixia, guessing that the man had something to tell him. Lin Feng, in the Qixia troops, apart from me as an officer, there are 3 non-commissioned officers, 30 lieutenants, 300 sergeants and 3,000 guards. In total, there are 28,521 Qixia armored horses. All our troops are elite fighters. Our strategy is to fight 1 against 10. Even though we have less troops than the other factions, if we attack, we win, said Jiu Qixia in a calm and solemn tone. His words were poignant. Besides, he surprisingly perfectly remembered the exact number of Qixia horses they had. It was incredible that he knew the exact number. During battles, they could die at any moment, so it was difficult to establish accurate statistics. People would normally just have a general idea. Lin Feng, will you remember this? Said Jiu Qixia, which surprised Lin Feng. Why did Jiu Qixia want Lin Feng to remember it? But Lin Feng still nodded and said, I will. Then it's good. Lin Feng, every single member of the Qixia troops is an elite soldier. After each battle, remember how many we have lost. I will then know how many of our brothers have passed away. It will sadden me more with each death. So that next time, I will do my best and spare no efforts to greatly reduce the number of my brothers that have to die. Jiu Qixia was speaking from his heart. Lin Feng deeply respected him. Jiu Qixia was indubitably an outstanding officer who was like a brother to his troops, which is why he remembered all of them. Early in the morning, in the white fog, a bugle call filled the air and everybody on the military site could hear it. Early in the morning, in the white fog, a bugle call filled the air and everybody on the military site could hear it. In one tent, there was Lin Feng and he was wearing red armor which was the color of fresh blood. He raised his head and looked in the horizon. He said to himself, "They have finally arrived." In the middle of the night, he had received the information that the troops of the Mou country were already 50 kilometers away, but they weren't attacking. They were just setting up a campsite. The troops of the Shuayu country couldn't afford to neglect safety and they had sentinels making rounds and watching every single action performed by the troops from the Mou country. That bugle call, followed by the sounds of the war drums, probably meant the beginning of the war. The sound was unceasing but there wasn't the least bit of chaos inside the camp. Instead, everyone was extremely organized. The battle could start at any moment, it was impossible for the troops to panic because of that. A few silhouettes appeared and were all wearing red armor in Lin Feng's tent. Their faces were covered by their helmets but their expressions were sharp when looking towards Lin Feng. "Follow me," said Lin Feng indifferently. Immediately after, he left the tent and jumped on his dragon colt horse. The others also calmly jumped on their Qixia armored horses and followed him. The other Qixia troops looked at Lin Feng and the people following him. There were about 40 people. Their armor was an even bloodier red than the other soldiers to the extent that it was dazzling to the eye. It looked like the morning sun shining on a puddle of blood. 40 people wasn't enough to make a complete squad within the army either. In the army, sergeants controlled 100 people. Lin Feng and the others galloped past them at full speed. A short time after, they arrived in a place where the two military factions were facing each other. In front of Lin Feng, there was a vast black ocean of troops who were releasing a deadly qi. They were the soldiers of the Mou country. Before, Lin Feng had never seen a battlefield except on television in his previous life. When he saw it, intense feelings invaded his heart. In the middle of all these troops, one person was like a grain of sand. These hundreds of thousands of people, if they all used a bow, they could kill a single opponent in a flash, even if they had broken through to the Xian Qi layer. On the battlefield, extremely strong cultivators were rare, so relying on personal strength was too difficult. That's why Lu Zhonglan, back in the days, beheaded the leader of the enemy troops who was giving orders. Amongst the troops of the Shuayu country, the left, right and middle troops were in perfect formation but the Qixia troops were dispersed across the army. Concerning the imperial city troops which followed Duan Tianlang, they were in formation shoulder to shoulder with the middle troops. Lu Zhonglan, Jiu Qixia and Ren Qingquang were at the very front of the troops. "Brother Lu, the enemy is arriving and they look terrifyingly strong. It seems like they have over 500,000 troops. How are we supposed to cope with them?" asked Duan Tianlang indifferently while galloping towards Lu Zhonglan. "Duan Tianlang, do you think that the Prince of Mou will directly attack us?" said Lu Zhonglan while turning his head around and looking at Duan Tianlang. He sounded cold and indifferent. While two armies were facing each other, even if one was in numeral superiority, it was impossible for them to launch a direct attack. A war was about exchanging lives, even if they won, the result would be tragic. Considering the reputation of Mou, it was impossible for them to launch such an attack. "Brother Lu, you always understand the enemy properly before the beginning of the war." "I admire that," said Duan Tianlang while smiling indifferently. "It's just that there is a huge number of possibilities." "What about the princess? She is amongst the troops right now. If something happens to her, who will bear the responsibility? I think that you should find a solution to win as soon as possible. The princess came with you, so it's your duty to ensure her security," said Lu Zhonglan while smiling coldly. The troops were going to engage in a close combat from morning to evening, and Dan Tianlang was asking Lu Zhanglan to fight a solution to win as quickly as possible. Not only did he make him bear the responsibility for the battle but was also making him responsible for the security of the princess. That was ridiculous. Brother, how can you talk that way? This territory is yours, I am a guest. Since it's that way, the princess' safety is in your hands. Obviously, if you don't care about that, you should remember that you took away the princess' personal guard, said Duan Tianlang coldly while looking at Lin Feng. Duan Tianlang, you are facing the enemy army and surprisingly you are still in the mood for boring conversations and refuse to assume your own responsibilities, said Lin Feng while urging on his horse. Under his armor, his facial expression was extremely sharp. He then said, "If anything happens to the princess, I will die, but could it be that you are forgetting about your own responsibilities?" When he finished talking, Lin Feng didn't wait for Duan Tianlang to reply and immediately urged on his horse galloping towards Duan Xinyi. At that moment, Duan Xinyi was also wearing armor but her beautiful eyes were not hidden by her helmet. In order to see, there was a slit for the eyes. Behind Lin Feng was a group of people wearing bright red armor. Their faces were entirely covered except for their eyes which looked extremely sharp and cruel. "What are you doing here?" asked Yu Tianchen, who was protecting Duan Xinyi on her other side. When he saw Lin Feng, he looked vigilant and cold. "That's none of your business," replied Lin Feng coldly. He then handed over a helmet to Duan Xinyi and said, "Princess, that helmet will protect your face. It's better for you to wear it." "All right, thank you," said Duan Xinyi while putting it on her head. In case of sudden attack, that helmet would be much safer for her. "Lin Feng, you are my personal guard, stay here and protect me," said Duan Xinyi with a beautiful smile on her face. In case of danger, her face would be protected. At that moment, she was wearing the helmet so only her beautiful eyes were visible. On the back of her horse, she looked majestic and heroic. Lin Feng was surprised and immediately nodded, "All right." Yu Tianchen stared at Lin Feng in an ice-cold way but Lin Feng ignored him and gazed at the boundless distance. Suddenly, the army of the enemy appeared. Many people were mounted within the enemy army. A cloud of dust filled the air. They were about a kilometer away from the Shuiyu army when they stopped. "We are the Black Guards of the Mou country. 36 people, who dares to fight us?" said a loud and deep voice. The Black Guards of the Mou country were like the Qi Xia troops in Shuiyu. They were the elite soldiers. Jiu Qi Xia looked calm when he saw them and said, sounding indifferent, he said, "Don't fight." The Qi Xia troops looked expressionless. They had no particular feeling. Orders were like mountains. They only obeyed orders and were never swayed away by their personal feelings. "Don't fight," said Duan Tianlang while smiling coldly. He raised his head and said arrogantly, "The Qi Xia troops are the elite forces of the Shuiyu country and today we are at war. Surprisingly you said we're not fighting. Why are you ruining the troops' mood? What is your purpose?" "Duan Tianlang, if you want to fight, then send your own troops," replied Jiu Qi Xia coldly while glancing at Duan Tianlang. The Black Guards were all outstanding. Not a single person was weak. Powerful qi was emerging from their bodies. No wonder that they were elite troops. So that's how the Qi Xia troops are. What a band of scoundrels. "Even though I am not talented, I will also not move back," shouted Duan Tianlang in an extremely loud voice so that everyone could hear him. In a flash, Duan Tianlang moved all of his troops forward. Every day, he found the Qi Xia troops more and more disappointing. First, they hadn't opened the city gate for him and at that moment they didn't dare fight. Lu Zhanglan didn't deserve his nickname, the Divine Arrow. Amongst the people of the Celestial Academy, who is willing to fight? "I can send out 35 elite troops and let you lead the battle," said Duan Tianlang while galloping towards the students of the Celestial Academy. "Of course, if none of you wants to fight, I will send someone from the holy courtyard of Shuiyu." "I want to fight," said someone at that moment amongst the people of the Celestial Academy. A young man came out and energy was emerging from his body. All right. Students of the Holy Courtyard of Shuayu and of the Celestial Academy are all outstanding disciples in the Shuayu country. 35 elite disciples, come out and go fight along with that young man. Show them how majestic and prestigious our country is, said Duan Tianlang heroically. How strong are these black guards? Asked Lin Feng with a subtle question. 36 people, the weakest ones are at the 3rd Ling Qi layer, 10 of them are of the 4th Ling Qi layer, 6 of them at the 5th Ling Qi layer, 2 at the 6th one and 1 at the 7th, said Ba Dao in a low voice. Lin Feng was astonished. These black guards were strong. The weakest were at the 3rd Ling Qi layer. They were very strong. Surprisingly, there was even one at the 7th Ling Qi layer who alone could defeat 100 Qi Xia troops. Jiu Qi Xia had chosen not to fight, he obviously had a good reason. The Mou country had directly sent such an elite formation of soldiers, this was a tactic of war. At that moment the 36 people were already leaving. Lin Feng saw the qi that students of the Celestial Academy were releasing and said, "You cannot join the fight, you will all die." "Huh?" said a young man while frowning and looking at Lin Feng. He then immediately replied, "Lin Feng, you and me are both military students, I thought that you were hot-blooded like me. I wouldn't have thought that you would be a coward." When he finished talking, that young man immediately galloped towards the black guards. When these black guards saw the Shuayu people arrive, they firmly held their spears. When the Shuayu cultivators arrived in front of them, they released a powerful qi and they all threw their spears which flew through the air at incredible speeds. At that moment, there were horses chaotically running around and neighing. The spears had all reached their destination, the hearts of the 36 Shuayu cultivators. 36 strong and famous Shuayu cultivators had just met a violent death. One spear had been enough. Lin Feng looked expressionless. He had warned them, but they hadn't listened to him. What else could he do? The 36 black guards took back their spears, went back in formation and shouted, "The black guards invite the Shuayu Qi Xia troops, come and fight." The Shuayu army was silently looking at that row of black guards. They were astonished. The Shuayu army was silently looking at that row of black guards. They were astonished. These 36 black guards were incredibly strong. These black guards and their spears were proud and despised the Shuayu army. They could kill people with a simple toss of their weapons. When they heard the invitation of the black guards, the Shuayu army remained silent. Glorious deaths, they deserve respect. Not all the students of the Celestial Academy are cowards who don't dare fight, said Duan Tianlang in a low voice. Then, sounding inspiring, he said, "Amongst the geniuses of the Celestial Academy, who is willing to go and avenge your fellow students? Cowards who don't dare fight?" Lin Feng obviously understood whom Duan Tianlang was talking about. Everybody did. As you said, we are bound by a common hatred for the enemy. The Holy Courtyard of Shuayu and the Celestial Academy are fighting as brothers. I heard that your son, Duan Han, is an outstanding genius. He has also come to the battlefield to acquire practical experience. I would like to invite Duan Han to regain our country's prestige, as our country has just been humiliated," said Lin Feng. "Let Duan Han go and accomplish the heroic deed," said a person behind Lin Feng extremely loudly. "Let Duan Han go and become a hero," shouted a person in the middle of Qi Xia troops. These voices were deafening to Duan Han's ears. Duan Han and his father were staring at Lin Feng. How cruel and sly. They had almost forgotten their original evil and malicious intentions. You just said, a moment ago, that dying on the battlefield was a glorious death, worthy of respect. Duan Han is not a coward, he is extremely powerful. He would not be scared and turn down a fight. No matter what the result of the battle is, it doesn't matter, it is glorious and worthy of respect. Therefore, I want to invite Duan Han to fight for his country, said Lin Feng firmly. Let Duan Han go and fight, said another voice extremely loudly. Duan Tianlang was fixedly and coldly staring at Lin Feng. That bastard was putting him in a situation which he could not get himself out of. If I want to fight, I can decide myself. What is the point in putting so much pressure on others? Shouted Duan Han to Lin Feng loudly enough so that everybody could hear him clearly. Shut up. When Duan Han finished talking, Lin Feng shouted even louder, you and your father are really shameless. I put pressure on you to go and fight? You don't even dare fight. Since the beginning, you have only sent students of the Celestial Academy to fight because you want them all to die. Lin Feng was surprisingly verbally attacking Duan Tianlang and his son in the presence of all the troops. Everybody was stupefied, but the students of the Celestial Academy, who were initially not reacting, narrowed their eyes. They became aware of how malicious and sly Duan Tianlang was being. Lin Feng, do you know to whom you are talking? Said Duan Tianlang, sounding extremely evil. He was the chief commander of all the army and Lin Feng surprisingly dared humiliate him. I am not under the authority of the chief commander, said Lin Feng coldly. Duan Tianlang wanted to speak, but suddenly a cold voice spread. Duan Tianlang, I let you enter the city for you to help us fight against the enemy, not for you to cause trouble here and act childishly. It was obviously Lu Zhanglan. Immediately after, he looked at Lin Feng and said, you contradicted Chief Commander Duan Tianlang, and that is an offense. You go fight and atone for your crime with military accomplishments. Roger, General, nodded Lin Feng solemnly and respectfully. Immediately after, he looked in front of him and started galloping at full speed on the back of his dragon colt horse. He was closely followed by more than 30 fighters wearing blood-red armor. A cloud of dust rose around them. When the black guards saw Lin Feng and the others approach, they threw their spears at terrifying speeds which emitted whistling sounds as they pierced through the air. Powerful chi was emerging from their spears. The sounds of the spears piercing through the air spread across the battlefield. Break, said Lin Feng at that moment. Immediately after, all the fighters surrounding him took out weapons which diffused a resplendent glow and cut the spears down. Pish, pish, pish. The crowd only saw that these spears which were moving towards Lin Feng and all the others at full speed had just been broken and some had been split midair. What's going on? Everybody was shocked. How was that possible? Even though Lin Feng and his fighters were stronger than the opponents, it wasn't possible for them to be able to break those spears so easily. What sharp weapons! The crowd was looking at the weapons Lin Feng and the fighters were holding in their hands. They were extremely sharp. Go! After Lin Feng said that word, they galloped towards the opponents at full speed, and in the blink of an eye, blood splashed high into the air and the sound of cutting flesh followed by horses neighing filled the air. Ba Dao's blade moved through the air and released tyrannical blade energy. His strength of the 6th Ling Chi layer meant death for all the black guards. Lin Feng's long sword was dazzling as he attacked the leader of the black guards, who was at the 7th Chi layer. His sword twinkled and immediately pierced through the atmosphere, releasing an insane amount of deadly energy. In the blink of an eye, half of the black guards were dead and many of them were injured. Block, the leader of the black guards blocked Lin Feng's sword while his face turned deathly pale. Since when were there such strong cultivators recruited into the Qi Xia troops? Invincible. In the middle of the fight, the black guards suddenly started turning around and insanely urging their horses to retreat. The whole Shuiyu army was dumbstruck. Kill, said Lin Feng. Everybody understood clearly. They all readied their weapons as they caught up with the black guards and gave them a bloody, violent death. Lin Feng on his dragon colt horse and the others on their Qi Xia armored horses continued chasing the remaining black guards who were still trying to escape. At that moment, a strong and robust silhouette jumped from his Qi Xia armored horse, roared loudly and stamped onto the ground. A huge crater appeared in the earth under the black guards, making them all collapse into the crater, unable to escape. Break! The leader of the black guards grabbed his second spear and thrust it into the wall of the crater. A loud rumble filled the air, the ground was shaking. A hole had appeared in the wall where the spear landed. The chief of the black guards wanted to escape through that hole. Stay there. Immediately, vines appeared and wrapped around the black guards, constricting their bodies and making them unable to move. Tyrannical blade. In the air appeared an illusionary blade which immediately cut downwards. Many of the black guards were struck. In the blink of an eye, only one of the black guard remained, their leader at the 7th Ling Chi layer. Since the beginning of the fight, only the time of one deep breath had elapsed. "Arg!" shouted the leader of the black guards. His spear seemed incredibly powerful. He jumped off his horse and his body flew into the air. Lin Feng looked calm and solemn. He actually gave his own helmet to Duan Xinyi, so he hadn't been wearing one himself. His handsome face was visible and his long hair was fluttered with the wind. His body slightly urged his horse on. Immediately after, he jumped into the air. At that moment, an incredible amount of battle energy was burning all around his body. In the sky, an illusionary black sword appeared, a deadly yet divine sword. "You attacked my comrades, which is a crime. I must kill you," said Lin Feng in a solemn and calm tone. His body was still in the air. He took a deep breath and his deadly black sword fell from the sky. Psh! The black sword illusion fell down from the sky and cut the body of the black guard leader down the middle, and his body split into 2 pieces. He didn't even have the time to let out a horrible shriek, he was just silently cut into 2. Boom, 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 boom. That attack had been so incredible that everybody's heart was pounding loudly in their chests. An illusionary sword in the air had cut the black guard's leader into 2. How powerful! Besides, the one who had launched that attack was still a young man. At that moment, that handsome young man jumped back onto his horse and calmly returned to the army. The entire army was looking at him and were frantically trying to get a better look. They wanted to see that young man more clearly. Woof! The sky was shaking. The Qi Xia troops' hearts were filled with burning enthusiasm. It had been a long time since they had had that feeling. They hadn't thought that such a young man could awake such feelings in their hearts. Jiu Qi Xia smiled indifferently. He calmly looked at Lu Zonglan and said, "General, I see your image in him." Lu Zonglan turned his head and smiled back at Jiu Qi Xia. "I haven't seen you smile in a long time," said Lu Zonglan, and then turned around. The Mou army was surprisingly turning around and retreating. They had come for power and prestige but had to move back because of Lin Feng. "I am not as gifted as him," said Lu Zonglan discreetly to Jiu Qi Xia, which made him shiver. Immediately after, he smiled again. Lin Feng's spirit was stronger and he had a higher natural talent as well. Lin Feng calmly returned to Duan Xinye's side as she took off her helmet. Her long and delicate fingers moved her hair aside and looked at Lin Feng with a huge smile on her face. Lin Feng was bewitched, her smile was truly enchanting. Only Duan Tianlang and his son had hideous expressions on their faces, especially Duan Han. Back in the days, he used to think that he was better than Lin Feng. At that moment though, he was weaker than Lin Feng and far from being able to catch up with his level of strength. "Lin Feng," said Lu Zonglan in a loud voice. "General," replied Lin Feng. "You are now a lieutenant. You are now in charge of your own Qi Xia unit called the Celestial Sword, and you are directly under Jiu Qi Xia. With the military merits of slaughtering the Black Guards and forcing the enemy army to retreat, Lu Zonglan obviously had enough to grant Lin Feng a lieutenant position. Lin Feng had just displayed how great his power was. Nobody was going to have any objections. Lin Feng gratefully accepts. You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.